clearly helped him defensively, and he pushed it to its limit by having his students train their attacks directly on him. He would give feedback as he pushed through Todoroki's ice or Bakugo's explosions, laugh as he out-grappled or punched Sato and Kirishima, and didn't even try to block Kaminari's thunderclap and flash. Now that he saw it, Nezu felt fairly confident this had to be where Ronin got his teaching style from. It seemed too similar to be a coincidence. The teachers had mixed feelings. No, wait, it was barely mixed. Almost everyone hated this, but the best and worst part was they could tell something extremely obvious. Yakuza Hunter was good at this, clearly explaining what he wanted from a student, then bringing it out. Unfazed by failure, and energized for success. Confident, boisterous, and knew just about everything he said. It was clear, despite the hubbub and complaints, that Yakuza Hunter knew his stuff. It made sense, he kind of had the man to take on 2 of the top 10 heroes. Not just anyone could that, but that didn't mean they had to like it, as Nezu heard plenty of until training was over. But that was just what Nezu heard his subordinates talking about. There was probably more. If they wanted to talk to him about it, they would, so he'd leave their errands to them and his errands to himself. And with the 2 gifts being stuck with him, riding back to UA's front gate with nowhere to hide Tilda. Well, what do you 2 know about the Shihasakai? Yakuza. Drug dealers, a few strong villains, supported by over 1,000 weak villains at least. Operating across several cities, with multiple drug dens. The strongest villains could give some of the top 10 trouble, in the right circumstances. The weakest are easy she targets. Barely worth noticing, totally untrained, and rarely with combat quirks. Well, that takes care of most of my errands, Nezu admitted, skipping ahead in his little internal plan. As you can probably imagine, the Hero Association has a file on the Shihasakai, Nezu said as he pulled a tablet from the front of the cart, searching around on it for a moment. He still didn't trust Yakuza Hunter, but on the other hand, he did trust Ronin, so Tilda, there's a lot of things we've got, but because of red tape, time, and a few other things, many things we can't look into in time. Ronin looked over Nezu's shoulder, checking out a long list of locations with annotations of crimes and people under each one. He remembered asking Nezu about any crimes or loose ends that needed looking into, and it looked like Nezu remembered too. Is that for me? Well, if a concerned citizen could look into just a few of these places till the time sensitive and all that, never know when the Shihasakai will cover their tracks and move on. Do it quickly, got it. Man, you were right, this guy only talks in circles. You get used to it. Nezu smiled, clapping his paws together. Great, I'll send you the list. Got an email address for me, Tilda? No, do you have it in paper? I would ask for a flash drive, but I don't want to think about what else you'd put on it. What, Tilda? Nezu at least feigned surprise, putting his paws on the sides of his head. I would never, after all. It's unlikely you'd put it on the guild's main computer, so it'd be pointless, but I can give you a virus to invert your mouse controls every 7 minutes. Papers, plural. Fuck it. Give me the flash drive. From there, it was just a trip back to the hideout to change outfits, then back to the golf course to split up with some chatter along the way. You actually backwood gonna do this sheet? Mao asked over the roar of his motorcycle. Midoriya couldn't see his face, but his voice seemed to say. Amusement. That was amusement, right? Actually, I asked for it, Midoriya explained, keeping the USB tucked away inside his coat for the drive. Saves me the work. Yee, have fun buying backwood to gopher. What, are you going to stop just because UA gave us these targets instead of me? Didn't know you had so much faith in me. I'm touched. So sentimental, Tilda. Mao laughed as they pulled up on the forgotten military base, sitting on the bike while Midoriya hopped off to open the front gate. Just seems fishy, that's all. Didn't know you could be cautious either. Midoriya mused as Mao drove through the gate, then walked after the big man while explaining some of his thoughts. I'm seeing free targets specifically, ones the heroes won't be going after, either because they can't prove these are real targets, they're tied up in government bullshit, or whatever else. I'll do some research into them myself, then pick the good ones to go for. There has to be a few I found on my own, I'll start with those. I didn't backquote say I wasn't backquote going backquote, Ju backquote point and backquote out. Mao walked his bike into the complex, parked inside a garage, and pulled out his chopper much flashier bike for casual occasions. Seuss. Definitely, Midoriya agreed, hopping on the back of the bike. Still gonna do it, but, Seuss. Hey, trusting backquote blindly is a way to get your ass kicked, Mao monologues as they drove through the gate, Midoriya hopping off to close it then hopping back on one final time. After all, you never know what the enemy is. Amogus. Yeah, wait, no yeah what the hell is Amogus? Stop making that face, dumbass, eyes on the road. Hey. The afternoon was spent checking out leads cross-referencing Nezu's list with what he already had, wondering if the show of trust by taking the drive was actually the right move, fixing his mouse constantly, and doing his best to make something resembling a plan. Which locations could be checked out in a row? Which could he hit in a row, even if things went south? Saturday was the in-person tour without Mao. Lots of trains, running, and a dash of parkour to check these places out, all the while he posted a few online searches to gather info from other vigilantes. Getting to these places wasn't very conclusive. There weren't many places with big signs saying evil organization here, but there was one that Midoriya marveled at the sheer stones of basically hiding nothing. No idea how the heroes didn't hit that one yet, but hey. When he got done looking at 10 sites, he came home and started combing through the research. He had the files copied and stolen from places he'd already been. The list had rough estimates of suspected crimes in each establishment, but if any of them were definitive, they wouldn't be on the list. I might just have to grit my teeth and make a few wrong calls, Midoriya muttered as the scene played out in his mind's eye. Odds were good that some of these places weren't tied to the Yakuza, so while he tried to weed them out beforehand, he still might stumble into an innocent building or two. It'd probably go even worse than the market raid, when the citizens turned on him because of just how villainous he looked. And breaking and entering without reasonable cause definitely a crime. Plus, it's not like I can tell anyone where I got these files. Scrolling through the files, Midoriya imagined that this could lead to more run-ins with heroes. When doing hits on the street, there was basically no chance that a hero would show up and interrupt. The risk was a smidge higher with the warehouses and abandoned buildings, but villains set up there for a good reason. They were so out of the way, heroes would basically never be near them. Heroes like to patrol in populated areas, be it for cynical reasons like raising their popularity or more optimistic reasons like standing by to protect the citizens. Some of these locations weren't so out of the way, though. To start with the furthest or closest, Midoriya leaned back in his chair, arms crossed behind his head as he stared up at the ceiling. Start further, little to no chance of heroes, higher chance of heroes on later hits. Start closer to society, and you start with a good chance of heroes arriving, but the first hits won't be prepared, and the later hits will be easier than if you went far too close. Fuck it, I'll just bug Mao. He can pick no, wait, he'll definitely pick close to far so he can fight heroes. Hern Tilda. There was something good at the end, at least a gift Midoriya must have scrolled by a dozen times and only noticed because he was going through each file one by one to quickly read them, because Nezu was incapable of doing things the simple way. Of course, he had to hide it amidst other files. Would it be Nezu if he didn't? Midoriya was a little surprised to see it pass into the provisional license exam included on the file. While the event was technically free for anyone to enter, only the press and heroes really bothered. Everyone else would just see it online, and even most heroes would gather info online instead of in person. Ronin had to be there, though, he promised Kaminari he would, and that was the problem. Not Midoriya, who'd get in easily, Ken, aka, the Ronin. Midoriya had been wondering how he'd do it forget his weapons. If the check had any decent security for the public entrance, they'd probably take off his wig accidentally. But with a UA pass, on the other hand, Tilda. Even better than a student pass, giving him a lot of freedom as long as he played along. With the pass came a few instructions on what to do, like time of access, which door to go to, and what to do when inside. He couldn't help smirking, wondering how many times he'd done this before but never like this. Well, he'd been to the exam before, and he'd probably go again. He just added like this, ever again. With a smile he couldn't shake, Midoriya checked on his mom to make sure the coast was clear, then sent through a print job and went to grab it before anyone could notice. Didn't want any disruption to tomorrow's plans. Sunday was a respite from hair pulling and planning Izuku's usual outing with his mom, a small shopping trip into trying to cook together for lunch, then a picnic. While not statistically the best way to spend his time while trying to plan how to take down an entire Yakuza, it was great for clearing his head, forcing him to slow down and breathe. But the time to rest could only go on so long before the real work began. Yakuza hunting. Preparing for school? No. Better. The line into the provisional license exam for watchers wasn't long, but it sure was slow. There were lots of media types with cameras everywhere, more heroes, and even more security. If he used Yamato, Midoriya was fairly confident he could sneak in through the sewers. This place definitely had a basement he could get in through. But he didn't have to nod with a certain pass in his hand. With the UA pass in hand, Ken walked straight up to security, getting in with just a nod even with all his weapons on display, because who'd bat an eye at a hero having equipment? It was the perfect disguise. He was so close to a hero all the time, even the other heroes around him didn't bat an eye at him, just another face in the crowd, albeit a very generic one, so who would bother focusing on him? After a small meeting to set the scene with the other people who had a pass, going over this provisional exam, students to look out for, and a brief questioning period, Midoriya was free to look around but with no one he was really familiar with, Midoriya opted to find his seat instead of trouble. The seating was large and open, much bigger than a football field, and with a god-awful view of the action. Most of the place was a pseudo-city, far larger in scale than the one Cementos made on Ronin's Wings, a city that was practically the size of a real city. The fact that the Hero Association had enough money to waste on this was oddly disconcerting. The place was so large that it was hard to see anything actually going on. One would need binoculars just to see any single person. Luckily, there was already something to look at, a big hole in the middle of the stadium. If this test was like the one Midoriya had seen online, the students would come from there, but who knew what the first challenge would be this year? Well, he did, cause of that meeting Tilda. Man, this was awesome. Was this what it was like to actually know what was going on instead of just reacting to it? He wished he could get used to this, but even Midoriya wasn't crazy enough to think that it ever happened. There were cameras stationed around the place and live feeds you could look through your phone to see, letting people actually view the action. Most of the footage that the reporters would take would come from those, shared across all networks, but some would come from individual camera crews if any students got close enough to the border. Maybe some camera crews got permission to move out of the stands for better footage. Ah, there probably were channels who'd buy exclusive rights to some footage. Maybe some channels already had cameras installed in here to get their footage, or drones to fly around and navigate the obstacles while still getting decent shots. Individual details like that hardly mattered, though. Midoriya settled into a random spot midway up, deliberately going away from everyone. There were seats for thousands, and even with the hubbub, there were fewer than 300 people in the stands. Finding an empty spot was a piece of cake, then it was just settling in and flicking through the cameras to try and get familiar with how this would work. There was some time before the event started, and most people took this as socializing time. This was a good event for the press to find future stars, and for heroes to find potential sidekicks. Then, there was the final branch Midoriya hadn't considered. There were the teachers. Off to his left was a racerhead and a woman in some sort of clown outfit and joke. Man, that took him back. He met her once when he was a kid. He was pretty sure he got her autograph, but all she did was sign half a joke, promising that the next time they met, she'd write the punchline. It was some good PR, and maybe he could get the second half of that joke now. Twice. They'd met twice. Ah, right, Midoriya muttered, halfway through rising out of his seat before settling back in, a little deflated at the memory. Yeah, he definitely shouldn't talk to her. She was talking to Racerhead right now, and she looked a lot better than. Well, when he last saw her, to say the least. So, with moods dampened and reality setting in, Midoriya got comfy in his chair and watched the display. When it finally started, it was nice to see an odd sense of view on his phone and the in-distance match up, a large box rising out of the hole amidst the stadium before the box unfolded like origami, exposing a tight package of students who began to scurry in every direction like ants. It was only through the footage that you could find individual people, and that took quite a lot of channel surfing. Luckily, the cameras seemed trained to follow the action, and the action was UA, as always. It was a well-known phenomenon in any circle that studied heroes. Since UA had its sports festival that showed off its students, almost everyone knew to expect them, and so they'd be targeted first, the crushing of UA, or something. Of course, it never went well, and UA always got at least half their students through. They were the best hero school for a reason, and besides, most of the info from the sports festival was outdated now. Students could use their costumes, enhancing them beyond their previous limits and giving them new avenues to use their powers. Students like, Earphone Jack, whatever her real name was, went from god-awful to threatening now that she had a way to attack. Without her costume, she could just poke you with her earlobes, but now she could use her sonic boot things to project sound-based attacks. Others like Bakugo didn't need their costumes, plenty scary on their own, but they got even worse with their costumes. Almost no one was trying to compete with Bakugo, who immediately left the pack along with. Most of Exam F. It looked like they'd be easier to follow now, since they were the reason Midoriya came. And what a good reason they were. There were many small moments that Midoriya took notes on, but overall, the first round wasn't anything unexpected. Many small hurdles, many good heroes, but an overwhelming number of people who weren't thinking straight. Exam F ran into an opponent who had defeated over 20 people already with his quirk, folding them like Play-Doh, but he kept going because he was too concerned with defeating UA to remember the goal wasn't just to defeat others, it was to pass the exam. He was defeated resolutely in one solid blow by Kaminari, who to sum up the situation, was one of the last members standing. It was clear the opponent had seen footage of Kaminari fight, attempting to use ranged attacks to try and defeat Kaminari, actually turning it in Kaminari's favor that he never actually used his sword until now. The opponent fired 2 flesh lobs, giving a clear opening that Kaminari took advantage of to rush straight past the attack and counter the suddenly unprotected opponent, knocking him out with a single solid hit to the face. Ronin smirked at the sight against an unready opponent. One good hit was all it took. Man, he kind of missed his trash sword, and Yamato being able to smack villains right in the face. He had to be super careful with Muramasa now, making sure not to cut or kill villains. Maybe he should try making another blunt weapon since he gave the Kanabo away. But this wasn't about him. He smiled as Kaminari helped the other members of Exam F. He laughed when Exam F remembered that they weren't the only people that strange opponent hit and had to scatter to escape, and he nodded in approval when, before the round was even halfway over, all of Exam F made it through. The small moments Midoriya took notes on weren't just Kamen Sato and Kirishima's fighting was good, but it was time for them to start supplementing it with some movement, be it parkour or just old-fashioned climbing. Mina and Zero were vice versa, very developed movement, still needing touch-ups on their direct fighting. Bakugo was just getting distracted and barely using his teammates clearly. The blonde bomber and Midoriya had more in common than he, though, if they both sucked at having teammates this much. By the end of the first round, a lot of the competition had been hazed out. Only 100 students were allowed to pass on from the first test. A massive increase in villains with All Might's forced retirement spelled how bad an idea it could be, forcing about 93% of the students to repeat if they wanted to succeed. But on the other hand, the hero market was oversaturated already, and this at least called for what the field needed: strong combative heroes. Being flashy and looking cool weren't what was tested in the first wave. The ability to eliminate opponents and keep yourself in the game, exactly what Ronin specialized in. He probably would have done great in this round if he'd been in, but again, this wasn't about him. He could at least take pride in seeing that his training paid off. Everyone had super moves or ultimate attacks, but the basics you could repeat over and over were what affected students the most on a moment-to-moment basis. Exam F's harsher combative training against an overwhelming force pushed them to be the best candidates he saw. Although he was only watching them and their opponents, so it should be taken with a grain of salt. There was a break between rounds to give the facility and the faculty time to set up for the second round. A swarm of people coming out in an advertisement playing on the camera feed for professional fake civilians, a surprising to be sure. Usually, UA would supply this event with robot civilians likely to spread their influence and to cheap out on paying the entrance fee by using spare robots who couldn't be beaten up any further. Midoriya checked the time 30 minutes to the next part then got up and stretched. Since he got to skip classes, he never stayed in one place for this long. His chair was kicking his ass worse than the Yakuza. Best to take a little walk. And besides, with a certain broken key sitting comfortably underneath his coat, he was sure he could get into some back areas to say hi to a few friends. The students' area, called the ATM room, was packed and loud to boot. Those hyperactive students had a lot to talk about. After all, there was some crazy stuff going on. For the groups who weren't UA, people were discussing with each other who managed to get in and who flunked. For UA, it was more a free period to talk with their classmates, catching up and relaxing to see they all got through before the big moment, the final part of the test. I mean, this was total cake, said Mina as she stretched her back, lounging next to the other girls, but subconsciously close to the rest of exam F. Dodging just some balls. Super slow tilde. I thought it was a bit difficult if not by speed, sheer volume, admitted Momo, sitting a lot more elegantly than Mina bothered to. So many directions at the start. I don't know what I'm in greater disbelief at that all the other schools would team up against us, or that I didn't see it coming. So unmanly. Kirishima roped himself in at that point, shaking his head, surrounding one group just for what they thought were easy points, and it wasn't like I could just tank those hits. My instincts were screaming at me to stand my ground and push through it all. Wait to resist, you'd be the only one out if you didn't dodge. Uraraka cheered Kirishima on, impressed that he managed to conquer his usual instincts in the match on top of it. That whole round played against his strengths, a fight that basically ignored defense. Only got that far cause I followed Bakugo. He blew through everything that came our way, literally. You should have seen him. Kirishima freely gasped Bakugo up, with Kaminari nodding in the background. He didn't even need to blow them back, he was soaring. TCH. Bakugo just rolled his eyes, unimpressed. That was nothing, just what Teach Bakugo trained us to do. Comparing this shit to him is insulting. His knives alone were harder to dodge than some fucking softballs. Yeah, most of UA just bowled over Bakugo's less than stellar attitude, with exam F in particular even agreeing with Hyman if he came off like a dick cause he was one. Mina cocked her head, scratching her cheek as she thought about it. You know, between all the movement practice and him constantly using ranged attacks. Do you think he knows what's on the exam? Like, in advance? Cause it feels like we totally were prepared for it. Not unless he knew the exam half a year ago, Kaminari said, jumping in as he polished his blade, a little ritual to calm his nerves. First thing he ever taught me was a movement trick, and whenever we train now, he seems to keep polishing it. Maybe being good at moving and dodging's a big part of being a hero. Of course, Sparkplug, how can you beat crime if you can't even get to it? Bakugo roared, yelling at everything while his classmates took their number one student's words with an optimistic tilt. They could ignore his tone, but his words made a bit of sense and explained a few things. Even when he came in to be a practice villain, he was teaching movement, reflected Jiro, sitting beside Momo as she cycled through her playlist. I just figured he was playing into his strengths. He seems to be a hit-and-run hero like Aizawa-sensei. Guess it's just generally good for heroes, Kirishima agreed, nodding as the advice settled in his brain. Kaminari and Bakugo, though, felt a bit more pride in their teacher, in seeing someone you respected, and in turn, coming to respect them a bit more. It also played into itself, because if his teachings about traveling fast and dodging were good, what about the other things he taught? Both took their brief period of free time to dig into their personal bags, drawing seemingly identical roughed-up notebooks and giving them a brief flick-through. As a suspicious grandpa was stopped by security in the background, sternly told no parents could visit their students at this time, the announcements came on to direct the students' attention to a big screen dominating the wall. The students got to watch live with the audience at home as the previous battleground was blown to bits, buildings and natural terrain exploding then collapsing down only for a veritable horde of people to rise up through the rubble. The Help Us Company, a business of professional people in need of rescue, showed on the big screen, along with the basic instructions of the second part of the exam rescuing bystanders from disasters. A few of the students reflected this to recent events, like Hell Night in the Camino War to further back events like the Nomu attack on Hosu City, large events that put huge amounts of people at risk beyond just heroes. The students were given a few minutes and a brief rundown on the scene villain terrorist attack. The building they were about to be deployed to had just collapsed, some very basic stuff that while helpful left a lot of gaps, things the soon-to-be heroes would have to fill in while in the zone itself. And fill in they would. Badly. The students left their little room to find a mess of different messes, specifically, multitudes of smaller messes building off each other to create a massive mess. They were dropped into the ruins of a collapsed building with rubble all around to start, and off that, people were in that rubble, crying and screaming for help. The students were in a rush to try and help, directing their attentions to the pseudo-civilians, but it wasn't as easy as just diving in and offering a hand. People actually lost points for going in too fast, not properly assessing the situation of the people they were dealing with, and not even just the victims. For not properly assessing each other and working together, too. The first part of the exam might have been all about you, but the second half was all about teamwork. All heroes were on the same side, after all, and these students would have to be good at working with whomever they met in the scene, no matter who they were. But, with a little effort, things started to move in a direction. Students who knew what to expect took charge, directing the others, creating an area for a rescue helicopter to arrive, clearing a spot for the injured, and following through with first aid to help the injured until help could arrive. The students formed two groups without realizing it, or perhaps three: those who would go out into the destruction to search for the injured, those who would stay at the base to treat the injured, and those overseeing the groups to direct them. The last group was more a collection of individuals often interpreting with one of the groups, such as Momo, who would first overview a situation with several UA students before guiding them in entering the fray herself. With such clear teamwork, though, there were a few bumps to no one who knew him surprised, Bakugo was god-awful at this. Even when followed by Kirishima and Kaminari, the blonde bomber terrified even the victims, shouting at them and generally making the situation worse. Todoroki wasn't the greatest either. He was so used to using his quirk at full blast, he often went a step too far. Luckily he used his ice side, not his fire, so it was never too dangerous, only reckless. There were other students besides the ones from UA, even if they made up a fifth of the examinees, and other problem students too. There was one from Shikatsu High School rival to UA called Inasa Yoarishis who could have been the mirror image of Todoroki. Both overused their quirkless recklessly, with Yoarishi using his quirk whirlwind to lift everything from rubble to bystanders in the air and losing points faster than you could blink for acting before he assessed the situation, like checking if those bystanders even should have been moved in the first place. This situation is nuts, Kaminari remarked to Kirishima as they followed Bakugo, accidentally keeping a large amount of points just by comparison. It was partially due to being compared to Bakugo that the boys had barely lost a point between them. We've got to know all this stuff on site. What an injury is, how to treat it, how to tell the victims, how to interact with them at all. Kirishima listed it off on his free hand as the pair overviewed Bakugo getting into a yelling match with another practice civilian. It sure is a lot. Makes you wish we got some more rescue training, huh? Man, if only we got attacked by a horde of injured babes instead of those League of Villain guys, lamented Kaminari, stepping up to the edge. I'd gladly trade some combat experience for a bit of rescue right now. We see you down there. Hold on tight, we're coming to get you. Injured babes. Real manly, Kaminari, Kirishima lamented, rolling his eyes, then rolled his body as he jumped down the cliff, hardening himself for an easy descent and stopping himself before he crashed too close to the civilians, then getting up to help them on the ground floor while Kaminari tried calming down the firecracker up top. Still, Momo had a dangerous look in her eye as her team brought back another wave of victims. Not dangerous in the way Bakugo always looked like someone smelling a storm brewing, but unable to put their finger on where it was coming from yet. Don't you think it's too easy? Too easy. Mina, Uraraka, and many more guffawed at Momo's words. What do you mean, too easy? You ever tried aim acid? I've got to rescue people. With acid. I'm pretty sure I'm one of the hazards here. Said another student Tokiyami, and more worryingly for the rest, he seemed to be agreeing with Momo as he and Dark Shadow each carried a civilian out. While there are many people to rescue, the scene is still relatively calm. Yes, Tokiyami, exactly. Momo snapped, pointing at Tokiyami as he found the perfect word to describe what was on her mind. She raised her voice, waving a flag she made so the dozen or so people following her could easily see her. Please listen, everyone. While this situation does seem tough, this is still a calm situation without further complications. Aside from the buildings collapsing further, there are no risks. Oh no. Don't say it, you'll jinx it. It's hardly a jinx if everyone knows it's about to happen, Hiro. I cannot believe this situation is about testing our teamwork alone, continued Momo to the chagrin of most around her. Ace certainly would not allow such an easy test, and if only half of us are expected to pass, I believe the provisional license exam must have further tricks up its metaphorical sleeves. You don't have to say metaphorical, Momo. It's supposed to be unspoken. Yeah, well though or jinxeth, and it hasn't topped her yet. Therefore, Momo concluded, her voice carrying well over the rebel to her fellow examinees and the fake civilians who might have deducted points from her, weighing the plus of alerting her teammates against scaring civilians if this were a real situation plus the comedic irony of knowing what was about to happen. We can only conclude that this is the calm before the storm. Everyone, be on guard, and be doubly quick, for we never know when further disaster could. Boom tilde. Strike, finished Momo, glancing in the direction of a massive eruption. An entire section of the stadium exploded, sending bits of rubble and smoke scattering about. I thought something would explode halfway through her speech, to be honest. Same. All across the scene, everyone everywhere heard the thunderous explosion that shook the whole stadium for most, a dawning horror as they realized the situation was about to get a whole lot worse just after they barely started to make it better. Swarms of minions straight out of Super Sentai poured from the exploded hole, with Midoriya trying hard not to snicker at the scene, getting to see his students deal with the same bullshit he dealt with every night. Eraserhead got a chuckle, imagining his students having to do something they'd never done before, balance all their fighting practice with their massive inexperience rescuing people, and trying to make judgment calls. All across the stadium were similar reactions. This was where teachers got to see how their teaching method was working, and which of their students were paying attention in class. Not in tournaments with an unrealistic one-on-one focus, not in obstacle courses with one goal and a chaotic clusterfuck with 3 things going on and you barely had time to focus on one. Saving people, keeping yourself safe, and of course, echoed a voice from deep within the explosion as the last of the minions trickled out, a massive figure slowly walking out onto the top 10 heroes, in fact. 6 feet 8 inches and heavy for his size, with more muscles than you'd believe and several scars from first-hand heroism. Overviewing the situation as the smoke cleared, his voice was clear and deep as his eyes narrowed the number 10 hero, Gang Orca, and for today he and his crew would be Tilda, the villains. Chapter end notes. Yo, on the Discord there was a vote of a whopping 1 person plus 2 eventually to make this chapter take longer by changing it to add a fight scene. Originally, I was going to say, hey, look guys, we did it. 1 chapter, 1 arc, and we're done. But no Tilda, we gotta have cool fights Tilda. Man, it's like this whole FIC is about fights and skipping one would be, in my opinion, disrespecting the whole point of this FIC. My original thing was that I had an idea to put Ronin as one of the villains, but I don't think that would tell much of a story. We've seen him fight 1A before. We've seen him fight Exam F recently. There's not a lot for him that would change. He's a little out of their league. But when put to a vote, I realized Alpha, the story is called Ronin, we're not tied to him, we can branch off and explore the effects of him. So in canon what's about to happen is a fight between Midoriya, Todoroki, that wins Guy Yoarshi, and Gang Orca. We got a few problems. Wraith 1v4 at the top 10, including Gang Orca. Todoroki hasn't had his heart-to-heart with Midoriya, and as such, isn't using his fire still. Yoarshi has a bone to pick with Todoroki that's resolved because Todoroki got better in canon, but Todoroki never got better in Ronin. Lastly, and kind of majorly, Midoriya's not taking the test. He can't spearhead a fight he's not in, even Ronin's not the good. But on the other hand, we got plenty of heroes who've changed in different ways. Sato, Shiro, Mina, Kirishima, Bakugo, and most of all Kaminari. So what if a canon fight is basically impossible at this point? I've got my own fight. With Blackjack. And body hooks. This is a great time to show off what Exam F can do, after all, with a little comparison to canon. So what if this completely trashes my plan of moving directly into the Shuisekai arc after all that training? It's gonna be fulfilling, it's gonna be fun, and it's gonna be one hell of a fight. BTW Hellspawn, I blame you for responding to my question. If you didn't, I don't think anyone else would have bothered to check the Discord, so curse ya and your eyebrows. Boot aside from weeping over my plans cause the intrusive thoughts one and I have to include a better fight to end an arc on, and cause the canon fight is just a fire tornado and kind of lame even if symbolic that'll about do it. Thank you for reading, thanks to the Discord for responding, and thanks to Hellspawn even if I had to stay up late to finish on time. Wishing all of you a good time, but for now, adios amigos. Chapter 237, The Storm, Provisional License Edition. Chapter Summary. A deeper dive into the second stage of the provisional license exam, hitting some canon beats but with my usual focus of fights. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Screening the injured and performing first aid. Just moments ago, the displays of the stadium were filled with the students, observing them as they did their duties, observing when and how they took care of the pseudo-civilians to make sure everything was going smoothly. In the short time before emergency responders arrive, heroes must act in their stead and ensure a smooth transition after their arrival. The students were doing a good job so far. A designated area for the injured, sectioned off by severity, and squads of students to search for further injured. How are they doing? The Hero Association in charge checked his radio, flicking through the screens before responding. During the initial response, the usual, lot of messes. This group cleaned up their act very fast, though looks like we've got a few natural leaders in there. Always good to see, agreed the narrator with a chuckle. But in order to protect everyone, heroes are expected to multitask. Saving people, keeping yourself safe, and of course have villains. The wall before the narrator detonated with pre-planted explosives, going off in a safe but spectacular fashion, visible from every spot within the arena. With that gun and the scene set, the pseudo-villains arrived on the scene. 100 villains, to match each of the students present and with the heroes also needing to take care of civilians. Direct combat should be straight, outright, and completely impossible. The man in the chair huffed as the narrator moved into the stadium, speaking mostly to himself. From dealing with the Wraith in Musudafu's industrial district to the League of Villains search and destroy operation in Kamino Ward, a top 10 hero here just first third in rankings of heroes who look like villains. Zotilda. Are you having fun up there? Through the radio, the narrator, or rather the number 10 hero, huffed and rolled his eyes. He was Gang Orca, one of Japan's best combat and large-scale heroes for his large organization with many sidekicks, but apparently it still wasn't enough, given that the test had given him a few extra sidekicks as well. Little bit. Go scare the crap out of M. Sakuma. HMPH. Gang Orca subconsciously cracked his knuckles, like he did every time someone told him he was scary, but carried on regardless, leading his back forward and giving orders. Alright, everyone new hires, follow your Kai. Seniors, let on. Spread out, we want small packs for maximum impact. As Gang Orca began his arrival on the scene, the Hero Association representative turned on the loudspeaker to talk straight to the students, his voice echoing over the last crashes from the earlier explosions. Villains have appeared and started their pursuit. Hero candidates at the scene should continue their rescue efforts while also suppressing the villains. On the ground level, the students were taking the sudden rise in stakes as well as was to be expected. Not well. Continue rescue efforts while fighting. He either repeated aloud, glancing at his fellow UA students in surprise. Geez, are they serious? Cried out Mineta, head in his hands. Aren't they expecting a little too much? Even on the intermediate level, those not even in the action were a bit surprised. This situation would be difficult even for a pro, chipped in Aizawa as he shifted from leaning back to sitting upright. I'll say, chirped up Ms. Joke, sitting beside him. Situations like these make you wonder how well you would do, huh? HNGRH. That slight wind said everything. Aizawa could have looking at the scene. This kind of problem was not his specialty, every way to Sunday. Dealing with scared civilians, open fighting with villains, being on the defense of anyone part of it would have been a huge hurdle for him, especially when the villains didn't use their quirks. To think the provisional license exam is going this far. The Hero Association, though, had a very difficult time pinning down exactly what they should do for this year's exam. The exam was designed to pull forward whatever Japan needed that year. On one hand, it filled gaps in the current hero market, but on the other, it was always reactive, adjusting to whatever Japan needed at the moment and never what it would need after. Ball throwing. What is this, a carnival game? No, the goal isn't to be good at throwing, it's to deal with the chaos. How they'll use their quirks, how they'll work with and against each other, couldn't we just have them fight normally? The healing heroes can be everywhere this year, we have too many sites. We need something that will keep injuries down. PSSSSHT. Fine, carnival games it is. And what of the second exam? Papers were wrestled as everyone in the boardroom had switched papers, the only thing thicker in the air than the boredom being the bureaucracy of it all. A mix of a rescue scenario against overwhelming villain numbers. Should be interesting at least if because it's nearly impossible. How many heroes do we have today that could fill this? How many of the top 10? Because of the sheer scale of the scene, individual power is practically moot, commented another, flicking through all the disadvantages the students would be getting. All this will care about is teamwork, this isn't a hero exam, it's a sports tryout. Too bad, because it's what the top brass demanded. Those bastards. There were many dissatisfied noises all throughout the room. The National Police Association still had some pull, it seemed forcing a change in priorities this year, revisions in the evaluations and license requirements for the students, and a metric shit ton of paperwork for the Hero Association. Assuming all students have a basic knowledge of emergency procedures and first aid, we were told to focus their efforts toward cooperation. Oh, great. God damn it. They know rescue is the lowest priority for most students, right? Even UA only produces 10% from their graduates a year. Just look at Endeavor. Fucking look at him. Well, even if everyone fails this year, the schools should have adjusted their curriculum by next year. To say they had given up the hopes of everyone passing would be an understatement. They had been trying to figure out how to circumvent these requirements from the moment they got them, and honestly, who could blame them? They were told to make and run a test that even 100 current heroes would likely fail matched 1-to-1 with villains, trying to save civilians and dealing with the fallout of the previous natural disaster. It was secretly a 3n-1 special of catastrophes. The rescue and wreckage weren't big problems, but doing anything and fighting competent villains. It's worse, you know, said an older man, his hands laced together as he stared at the papers and said the truth no one wanted to hear. It's necessary. Tisk, yeah. The worst part was that this was very important because almost no active heroes could deal with this kind of situation. Usually, heroes worked in groups. Multiple heroes being deployed at the same time to deal with a single threat or villain, putting the odds numerically in their favor. Only the best could take on multiple by themselves. Usually, heroes split off to do their specialties. The vast majority of them fought with varying levels of rescue, and full-on support heroes took care of the rescued civilians. Usually, though, heroes would fail at this challenge overwhelmed by the sheer number of villains, they'd lose, then the villains would push on to attack the civilians. A complete wash. Japan needed heroes who could take All Might's place, though heroes who could be like him, rescuing tens of people at a time, then turning around to beat the villains back one-handed. This test was designed to create those kinds of heroes, and if they couldn't measure up. We might get a dead year, admitted one of the associates, but it's for the best if we do. We'll have to prepare some remedial tests for the close calls, those who do the best, to try and inflate our graduation numbers. The public will be in an even worse mood if they see only 10 to 15 hero graduates. That at least got an agreement, the remedials being the way the Hero Association could force heroes who should have gotten their license to graduate, with a usually fairly easy test that had to patch up whatever problems were faced in the actual exam. It was a method for getting people through the test since the tests were started. Balancing those who can solve this crisis with those who should, what a mess we're in, someone muttered. Usually, the need for more heroes wasn't that urgent, but with All Might's retirement and a sudden uptick in powerful villains moving, the Hero Association couldn't just rely on the same heroes who'd been floundering around in All Might's shadow. Hopefully, some fresh blood would pump some life into heroics. All Might was at the top of everything, strength and charisma. There's been a huge gap between him and every number 2 hero we've had during his run. I just can't believe Endeavor managed to get the closest to him. No one can, but as soon as Lemillion enters the field, Endeavor will settle nicely back into the Lancer role. There was some hope All Might had found someone with a quirk similar to his, a rising star named Tagata Mirio, who'd be fully entering the professional world at the year's end. Currently serving under Sir Night-Eye, All Might's sidekick, and learning under All Might himself, it wasn't him that the Hero Association hoped for a new All Might, at least while they tried to make sure a disaster like this never happened again. The upper brass wants an army of heroes with a strong sense of unity, but to make that in this short a time. The eldest committee member scoffed. Maybe by year's end, we'll see a few pass if they insist on using this harsh of a test, but this will only serve more as a stopgap. A lot of good students will fail, but if the upper management really wants to make better heroes, well, what's about to happen is all on their heads. What was about to happen was very simply a coordinated assault as gang work as boys spread out from their entrance quickly with sticky guns armed with a fluid that quickly solidified and trapped whoever hit where they were and covered in some of the best armor in the business. They were great for a safe test like this, especially for avoiding injuries. But make no mistake, you're counting this as real. The announcer gave a bit of narration, not just explaining the rules but setting the scene for the students. Already, the students were talking, wondering just how hard this test was, and if anything else crazy was going to happen in it before they started assessing how bad what was happening right now. Like, seriously, are you seeing this? Mina's eyes almost popped out of her skull as she stared, pointing at the cloud of destruction. They're coming out right next to the first aid station. They're cheating. Almost everyone over there is a support hero, Momo said, outlining the problem further. They're the least likely to have combative skills. Is the test supposed to be this hard? We might be missing something. No. At another point, Todoroki stared, his eyes slightly narrowing. There's nothing to miss. It was just unlucky. Unlucky, Kiro. Next to him, Suyu tilted her head, blinking. That area was chosen to be the first aid area because it was large, open, and flat. It's perfect for the first aid section, Todoroki explained as he stretched, letting his body regulate before he used more ice. Or a combat section. Wait, so? Those dipshits just happened to pick the same spot the test makers decided to put the fight. This isn't complicated, dumbasses. Bakugo barked, already flying over to the scene. Man, doesn't that mean we made the test harder? Kaminari and Kirishima were having a hard time keeping up, trying to stick together and still spot anyone in need of rescuing, but steadily losing the boy who boomed. Oof. Real heroes don't give a shit how hard it is, they push through. Bakugo's teeth glinted as he built height for safety before he started really flying. The old man wouldn't back down, and we won't either, you got it. Don't fuck this up, and meet me there when you're done fucking around with the weaklings. Yes sir, the boy said, sharing a smile as they saluted him before heading off to try rescuing a few more people. All across the stadium, the students were being monitored, and rather than gaining points for succeeding, they were simply losing points for failing, technically forcing the best of the best to shine through with a few flaws dragging it down. If someone did badly at the start, tough luck. If someone did too much and accumulated a few bad points every time, tough luck. If someone had one big fail at the end, tough luck. Despite its imperfections, it was sadly close to reality, where doing good was no longer enough, you had to do great and do it constantly. Each person had their own member of the Hero Association studying them, making sure everything was going smoothly and monitoring them, ready to report when any student dropped under 50 points and failed the test. There were, luckily, a few combat heroes at the first aid area at the time of the attack. Not only were some of the support heroes also good at combat, but most of the entire rescue team were combat heroes, and there were plenty of them around from bringing back more injured people. One of the students immediately took charge, issuing orders to the rest. Move everyone to the far side, I'll cover the retreat. Move, now. Quick decisions and a clear goal, that was the rough idea that could lead to success. The student raised his hands, taking a breath before dropping both arms and causing the ground to shift and vibrate. Before the villains could arrive, the ground began to tear itself apart, forming a difficult terrain and spreading forward to continue imploding underneath the villains to buy more time. But one of the villains wasn't interested in playing along. One hero, not good enough. Gangworker closed the distance by jumping straight over the destruction, then pushing off the rebel to slam headfirst into the lone student and creating something that sounded like a sonic boom on impact. From sheer force alone, the student went flying, ragdolled, sprawling out on the dirt as Gangworker stood and stretched. This was a test that measured everyone's ability to make decisions to see the goal and work toward it, while only being possible to achieve together. Only a single rearguard when there's this much of a difference in abilities. Gangworker straightened upright after his headbutt, wiping a speck of the student's blood off his face as he towered over all the children present. It looks like you're underestimating us. Shish. Gangworker had to turn suddenly, creating something like a sonic shield as a barrage of ice almost hit him in the back. And in turn, you're underestimating us, Todoroki said as he slid along his ice, quickly covering the distance and replacing the earlier student as the new rearguard. He planted his feet, not intending to let this fight move another step. You can't have countered every student's abilities, but you should have been ready for a few students with powerful quirks. As he spoke, more students began to swarm in, some to fight, some to help evacuate. Todoroki's face twitched as he heard distant explosions gradually getting closer, and even he couldn't tell if it was a smile or a grimace. Todoroki made his point, though, and he did it with flash with his 1 foot down. He spread a thin sheet of ice, doing his classic move of freezing most of the villain's feet to eliminate the small fry. You don't have real guns, they said. That means you won't have any means of escaping Morning Frosty, though you're strong enough to break through, or you're nothing. It was true most of the gang when hit were immediately stuck, and would be spending at least several minutes trying to get through the few inches of ice. Gangworker himself, though, was not one to be called weak. He didn't even stop for the ice, stepping through and charging right at Todoroki, who had to pull back his widespread attack to deal another focused barrage at Gangworker. Waves upon waves of ice were thrown at Gangworker, but by activating his quirk and slamming his head forward, he shattered it all. Between his blubber for insulation and his quirk, this is nothing for me. While you might be strong, I'm a bad matchup. Your ice can't freeze me, and I'm great in the cold. If that's all your tricks, I think your luck ran out. This was a much harder matchup than the first rearguard. Todoroki's ice didn't just take people's feet out from underneath them but also made walls to block further advancement. On the other hand, it was walls of ice, and Gangworker was barely being pushed back while his gang was restrained. It might take him a minute to push through and take out Todoroki, until, in a surprise twist, his gang was suddenly freed from their icy prison. By some gadget they had prepared, or excellent teamwork. No. Quite the opposite. By purely abysmal teamwork as the wind began to pick up. That's not Bakugo, was all Todoroki could get out, glancing over his shoulder to see who arrived before a gale nearly swept him off his feet, breaking all the ice defenses he'd made and throwing all the villains except Gangworker backward. Blow away. A distant scream that quickly came close with the roaring winds brought a student not from UA, a tall guy with a fur coat, militaristic uniform, and a massive gauntlet on one arm that he raised as he controlled the winds to fly closer. A villain attack. You guys prepared some pretty hot developments. The new student had an intense look to match his speech. Inase Yoarshi, the best student at Shikatsu High School U.A.'s largest competitor in Japan. Alright, things are heating up. But his intense joy at the fight, something he'd be good at, was whetted down as soon as he realized who the other student here was. TCH, it's you Endeavor's son. I haven't forgotten about you. And I can't remember you focus on the fight. Todoroki was unsure who exactly Yoarshi was, other than one of the students who'd been recommended to UA but decided not to go. Whatever his reason was, it was HI-san as long as he stopped bringing up Endeavor, they could ignore each other just fine. Gangworker stood ready. He knew what facing down the son of the current #1 hero meant, and someone who easily swept away Todoroki's attack was no laughing matter either. In his mind, this exam wasn't hard enough. They should have given him a lot more than just some extra hands to fill out his gang if he had to take on these kinds of students. Unfortunately, there was no help for it. He watched as Todoroki took a deep breath, thinking about it for a moment, then pulled back his left arm with a grimace as if in actual pain. I can't hold back. I have to pass, even if I have to use his power. With almost a pain snarl, Todoroki threw forward his left arm, curled like a claw, and only gave an instant before a huge wave of fire burst from his body like the ice had before. It was fire, Gangworker's biggest weakness. He didn't do as well when dry and he knew it. He braced for impact by lifting a large piece of rubble right before the fire blast shook it and watched as it suddenly petered off to the side and partially died out as intense winds bashed into it. It took everyone a second to figure out what just happened. The second student with the air quirk must have also launched an attack at Gangworker, using almost the same line. When the attacks hit each other, however, they did not combine or double in power, they cancelled each other out. Gangworker was most surprised of all, patting himself down a bit in shock before glancing over in confusion. What on earth? The two students immediately got to bickering. Why did you use fire? I've seen your file, you never use fire. Because he blocked the ice. I have to use it to hurt him, it's his weakness. He was not moved by your last air blast, so your presence is pointless. Stay out of my way. Ooh, there it is, that glare in your eye. I will not be moving just so you can steal all the glory. Glory, this is an exam, the only goal is to pass as efficiently as possible. Why would I do that? Why wouldn't you? You're the son of Endeavor. Who? Todoroki took a deep breath, his scowl deepening. Say that name. One more time. Say that name, and splat. As they were standing around arguing, two chunks of goo flew across the battlefield, striking Todoroki's right arm and Yoarshi's left, seeming to be both their favorites. This is outrageous. I can't believe you two would start arguing here or in the thick of it. You two are the last ones who have time for chit-chat, or worse, arguing. Gangworker could scarcely believe the nonsense he was seeing. Two of the students he'd been worried about the most canceling each other out, both in quirk and in action. Without a motion from him, the gang began a volley onto the bickering students, who managed to continue their argument as they evaded the attacks. Todoroki formed another ice wall, while Yoarshi began to fly between the shots, using his wings to bat them ASID and seemingly towards Todoroki, perhaps intentionally. To me, heroes are passionate. They inspire others with that passion, their passion pushing through to go beyond them. Yoarshi's words were directed at Todoroki even as his motions were focused towards the gang, beginning the counterattack by picking up the cement globs as they hardened in his grasp and pelting them back down at the attackers. But Endeavor, he has no passion at all. I've seen his eyes nothing but a cold anger. Yoarshi finished his attack, weaving in a new direction as the gang broke up into squads to escape his large effects and continue attacking. I met you in the recommendation exams for UA, and I knew who you were instantly. Not by your hair, not by your quirk. Yoarshi rose up to escape the shots, going higher than they could hit, creating a tornado to catch and spin the shots around before launching them again. Because you had the exact same eyes. T the same, and no, that's ridiculous. I shouldn't have used the fire. I knew I shouldn't have used the fire. Gangworker had no idea what was happening. He wasn't advancing, and by just the sound of Todoroki's voice, the kid was taking a battering. This sounded like something to be sorted in therapy, not on the battlefield. He knew Endeavor's son hated him, but just how far did it go? I'm not the same as him. I'll never be. No one could even hear Todoroki's internal meltdown as he instinctively grasped his cursed left side. Externally, Todoroki was doing great as always. The continuous shooting of quick hardening goo had actually built up on the ice barricade, forming a wall of hardened putty that was actually harder for Gangworker to break through, and before he knew it, Gangworker was in a tougher situation than he realized. While the two boys weren't trying to cooperate at all, they'd accidentally done a great job. Todoroki's meltdown caused him to make more and more ice, the supermas being so heavy it formed a huge wall separating the villains from the civilians. Meanwhile, Yoarshi's constant pelting of his own projectiles forced Gangworker to respect the student's airspace, being unable to easily advance to the ice wall to smash it down instead of the hammer and the anvil. These two had accidentally become a great mountain in its wind, nearly impossible to scale. Nearly. For the wind's brute force, Gang Orca spread his weight out, hunching forward before breaking from the pack straight towards an unguarded section of the ice wall. And for the ice's sonic headbutt. A shrill cry echoed as Gang Orca shattered the ice before it could even touch him, then carried that momentum straight through into an unsuspecting Todoroki. The headbutt hit dead on, Todoroki barely getting a last gasp before going down. The sonic strike left him paralyzed on the ground, lying helplessly on the ice. Gang Orca didn't break. A wall of ice, a good strategy. But you forgot line of sight. Gang Orca was quick to scold as Yoarshi turned his full attention to beat the top 10 hero, but with just a single hand sign, the gang's efforts to shoot Yoarshi redoubled, the gang splitting up into multiple sections to shoot from different angles and force Yoarshi's attention. I have my gang watching my back, but when you unleash your full power, you lose the ability to see past it literally. A common weakness of emitter quirks. I'm sure your father has told you that's why you should. Stop talking about your father. Gang Orca cut himself off, crouching, but then burst upward, jumping and scaling the remaining ice walls for a height advantage. Yoarshi had slowly drifted lower as the split gang fired above him, forcing him downward and into easier range for Gang Orca to come in and hit the other emitter in the back and paralyzing him on the spot, then grabbing him and holding him during the fall to not further damage the student than necessary. The same lesson for you being so confident in your wins, you were too busy focusing on dodging when you should have retreated. An army is not beaten by one. Gang Orca prepared to theatrically throw Yoarshi, but despite his rough tone, it was more like a fake wrestling throw with how gentle it was. With that, the rear guard was defeated yet again. From only 1 to only 2 and still not enough, Gang Orca said into his radio to both his crew and the exam staff. The way to the civilians is clear, squads 1 through 3, you're rolling with me. 4, take the scenic route, we'll see how far these heroes can spread themselves. The wave of goons began to mobilize immediately, following their leader straight towards the first aid area that was still trying to evacuate the injured civilians. The villains had the speed, they had the numbers, and with just a bit of time, they'd end the entire exam prematurely by killing the civilians. 100 men moving in unison, even if not directly used or working together, deployed through a network of people who knew and trusted each other, using simple weapons and simple tactics to achieve larger goals. A microcosm of the goal for this particular exam, displayed wonderfully on the villains' side. Even now, the heroes were still approaching one by one, trying to rush to get between the villains quickly instead of calmly planning things out. One even tore across the sky, likely not even seeing any of the other Hiroshi arrive far too soon to get any. Gang Orca paused mid-step, listening faintly to the background. A sound like fireworks was coming from the approaching hero student. Yes, but there was more than that. Was definitely saying something. Was he trying to coordinate with the other students? Saying something to the civilians? Gang Orca and a few of the other villains leaned towards him, trying to pick out the words coming in the distance. Alright, you never wears and never wills. Watch a real fucking hero. In action. On live television. So loud he was picked up by almost every camera, and so flashy you couldn't miss him. Katsuki Bakugo was flying straight towards the action, swearing profanity and making one of the most villainous-looking heroes in the entire association look like an actual hero as he trailed flames, smiling like the devil himself higher and higher before pausing and looking over the scene. No cities in his way. No limp dick losers moaning about daddy, or some energetic dipshit who kept getting in everyone's way. No villains, either. Just targets. Bakugo raised both arms, laughing maniacally at the chances he could feel the sweat dripping off his body towards his arm. She paused just for this moment and to steady his momentum before. There was a soft ping as his grenade gauntlet was primed, straight at Gang Orca from over 200 feet in the air, easily in his range, but well outside those stupid sticky guns' range. The blast radius was so large, Gang Orca couldn't get out of the way, and did it even take some of those extra losers with him. The range was clear, nothing for him to accidentally destroy, only rocky open ground. It was just like the old man told him. Different heroes specialize in different situations, he had explained as they stood in the rubble of the city. Endeavor might not be popular, but in a crowded city with things you don't want damaged, his quirk control makes him a far better pick than All Might, even if he is weaker. One important thing to being the best is to know what you're the best at. So, Bakugo, what's your specialty? When do you do your best? When there's no way to resist, nowhere to run, and nowhere to hide, you weakling-ass villains. Bakugo's voice echoed down just as everyone's eyes widened, realizing he was really gonna do it. At that moment, almost every channel decided to cut to commercials, everyone but one watching from a distance flinched before the flash, and everyone in range stared up in a mix of horror and honest as they realized what they were about to be hit with. My best ultimate move yet. Bakugo seemed to chuckle as he started to fall, necessary for offsetting some of the recoil of this next attack as he steadied his main arm, took aim, and remembered to take a deep breath and to avoid messing up his sights just like that old badass at him, then grabbed his grenade gauntlet spin and with one fierce yank, created the scariest sound yet as he smiled almost softly, leaning into it. Bang. Chapter end notes. Yo, so this arc is crazy short. Both parts of the arc are multiple episodes, but the second part is only 2 episodes long, with only one fight in it. In the original, the second part of the exam has only rescue for 1 episode to focus on. Hey, look, these kids learned rescue techniques. We just never showed it and will not be showing it again for a few seasons. And the second episode is a fight that IRL would only have been 2 to 3 minutes max. My problems with the rescue thing is whatever. Horikoshi couldn't make it interesting to see them learn, so he skipped over it. Glad he didn't try to force it in. My problem with the fight is that, if you think about it, this means the villains were only released 2 to 3 minutes before the exam ended, and after what we can probably assume is 20 to 30 minutes of searching at least, trying to search an entire stadium for injured people, 2 to 3 minutes is nothing. Why didn't the villains come out earlier? They could have harassed the heroes trying to rescue, pushed the first aid camp, and killed some of the civilians. When there's only 2 to 3 minutes on the clock, a half-decent monologue would have stopped the villains long enough for the exam to end. The actual beats of events in this part are fine. I did have to alter Todoroki, making him go back to his old ways where he would use fire, but only when he's forced to. I mainly just wanted to show that the canon parts we're not focusing on are still happening. I like theme, really like the Yoarshi vs Todoroki beef in canon, but there's not room for it here and I refuse to bloat this any more than necessary. The main thing that blew my mind on rewatch, where the fuck was Bakugo? I get it, this arc was setting up the fight between him and Deku, but holy shit, I didn't realize how much it forced him out. Like, Bakugo's whole thing is he's the best at fighting, and you're telling me he didn't even try to show up to fight Gang Orca, a top 10 hero who he counters really well. He's one of the fastest students in 1A, especially when there's obstacles cause he can fly over them. How the fuck did Ojiro, the tail guy, get there before Bakugo? The more I study Hero Aka, the more I see how many forces there are, and most seem to be with Bakugo for some reason. I really hope this isn't going to be a running theme. Spoiler, yes it is, since in the earlier seasons they were better at this. It wasn't a force that Bakugo was paired against Midoriya in the very first fight of Shield, it was the teachers interfering cause they saw an unhealthy relationship, and All Might talks about it in universe. Bakugo's rivalry brings him in naturally with the school festival, and for stuff like Stain, of course he's not involved, he interned under a different hero. These were great ways to put Bakugo in or out of the story, not pretending he doesn't exist for 15 minutes so you can do something cool. But enough of that. It's late, I'm running on no sleep, and I'm being too negative. Gang Orca is a pretty cool hero, even if probably not that powerful in the grand scheme on his own. On the other hand, what a fucking team. Swarms of goons with guns great for restraining villains safely, and fucking body armor. I missed it the first time, but damn, Gang Orca might be my favorite top 10 now. What a guy. That'll be it for this chapter, but thanks for reading, thanks for the Discord to pushing me to try a little faster, and thanks to my editor for putting up with my bullshit when they're busy. For now, this'll be adios, amigos. Chapter 238, bang. Chapter summary. Bakugo's chance to shine. Chapter notes, see the end of the chapter for notes. The provisional license exam's entire combat zone disappeared in a horrible flash. Ear-splitting blast giving way to earth-shattering power as a column of fire descended on the arena, intense heat completely outmatched by sheer force that hit the ground like the hammer of God. The ground was flattened at the point of impact, blasted back like a meteor had hit it. Pseudo-balloons were slammed into the ground so hard they were embedded where they had stood, then pushed harder, the ground itself breaking before the blast. Lastly, Gang Orca stood as best he could. He used a large chunk of rubble as a shield, bracing against it as it absorbed the first wave of force, then taking a direct hit as the blast overwhelmed and pushed through it, bombarding him with fragments of his former defense. It was visible throughout the entire arena, that massive pillar of flame and destruction, a modification and new application of an old technique. His grenade gauntlets had always been capable of this kind of power, he just didn't apply it this way before. By adding some verticality, the unleashed attack could strike a large area with focus, hitting a large spot with a massive direct explosion, then hitting a larger area with the runoff. It was huge, fast, and almost impossible to dodge. It was perfect. And almost everyone who saw it knew it. Aizawa and Ms. Joke stared, their ears ringing still, even as they clutched their heads. Ms. Joke leaned over, shouting to try and speak louder than the slight ringing in her head. I didn't know he could do that. What? The other students watched in sheer amazement. Whoa, Mina put a hand to her head, squinting against the sun at the tiny speck in the sky Bakugo's form, seeming so small from the distance but so large from the sheer power he displayed. Was that his grenade gauntlets, or his bare hands? Crazy. He must have reworked the storage tanks for his gauntlets, theorized Momo as she couldn't help but stare a little longer, head tilting as she worked the calculations. Maybe. Actually, he might have modified the release mechanism, getting more air in to fuel the explosion. I'll have to ask him later. Alright, everyone. Focus up and keep moving. First Kaminari, then Bakugo. Exam F's really getting that plus ultra stuff, huh? Sato said to Zero as they glanced up, then got back to sorting through the rubble. Guess so, Bakugo was always the best, so it's funny that even failing makes him better. Zero laughed, applying the last strip of tape, then acted as a counterweight, lifting one chunk of rubble while Sato barehanded another. Think we'll get our chances soon. The main man himself hung in the air after his best attack, smiling down at the scene. He didn't need to say anything. Not cause he was alone, but cause after a move like that, what was there to say? He'd been launched backward by the explosion, spun by the blast. It was a lot harder than he thought. He'd fallen for almost 3 seconds before getting his bearings and catching himself, then looking over the scene. Goddamn, he was awesome. It was like a miniature recreation of All Might's final punch, a crater at the impact zone, and everything laid to waste. With the open stone ground, there was no property to destroy, no civilians to worry about, the perfect time for an all-out attack. But what's that, in the distance? A speck on the ground moving. Bakugo had since stabilized himself with his explosions, breathing heavily from the effort, feeling a little nauseous too. Gosh, holy shit, that felt rough, but it wasn't anything too bad. He could still find his focus, falling a bit to see Gang Orca pouring water on his head, then looking up at him. Oh. One of the targets wanted to keep going. Well, that's perfect, you little shit. Bakugo laughed, flying up for extra height, then checking out his grenade gauntlet, closing the flopping pin so it stayed out of his way, then regaining control as he focused in on Gang Orca. What the fuck was that? Gang Orca worked his arms, grateful for the armor. He'd been given weights to slow him down, trying to give the weaker students a better chance, but it also doubled his protection. Its original purpose was as a powerful armor, but it was so heavy, heroes never used it in the field. Luckily, though, it held up with only a few scratches. His calm lit up, a little belated. That's UA's top student, Bakugo, but that was way worse than what he did at the sports festival. He's gotten way stronger. With that range, undoubtedly I had no way to hit him back. Gang Orca understood that while this move wasn't good to use all the time, in terms of sheer power. That's insane. From his vantage point, Midoriya stopped everything just to admire the view with a smile. This was the kind of nonsensical power that he expected from Bakugo. Bakugo had spent years focusing on strengthening his quirk, with increased control and coordination as a byproduct. These were important since, without them, he couldn't do anything with his power. Unless placed in a situation where control and physical coordination were relevant, say, using a full-powered explosion just before he started falling midair to let the momentum push him back instead of crushing him. This was Bakugo's strongest move in its best situation, like All Might's United States of Smash and Kamino Ward during Hell Night. It was unrivaled. It was almost unbeatable. Best of all, it showcased everything you needed to know about Bakugo as a hero, sheer destructive power, with the brains to back it up, and little that could compete. Of course, it also showed his flaws as a hero as well. I can't believe it, the Hero Association associate looked at the camera without eyes, smiling as he leaned forward. We found him. This kid, that level of power was comparable to All Might. Way higher than anything we've seen out of Endeavor. I'm glad you're enjoying my beating, Gang Orca mumbled through the speakers. How's the vitals? Everyone alright? The question was half asked through the communication systems, half shouted to his subordinates. Checking the systems, everything seemed so far. The sheer distance had eaten a lot of the power, a testament to how powerful a direct impact from close range would be. Looks like everyone's still kicking, though they might be stuck. No wonder we're using this armor, Gang Orca said as he stood, shaking off the rubble. I couldn't move for an hour in it, but in short bursts like this His speaking was cut off as the blonde bomber above shouted something, moving. He rose higher, making it even harder to see. Hold on, I'm finding his microphone. The associate skimmed through, making a little HMPH when it found it, and selected it. There you are, Tilda. You little shit. The voice that came through was loud and proud as the camera spanned up. Bakugo was laughing, having finished fixing his first grenade gauntlet, but then he raised his second gauntlet. Cause I've got 2 arms. Oh. Oh no. Oh yeah, bang. It seemed only Midoriya was prepared, as not even a minute after the first blast, Bakugo fired a second bang. The impact was at least subdued compared to the first. All the loose rubble had either been blown away or flattened, and all the people were stuck in the ground, meaning there was no escape as the second pillar of fire struck the ground. Gang Orca was the only thing still standing, his feet sinking into the ground, then his knees rocking as he pushed against the explosion before finally giving in with no cover and flying back, crashing into the ground. The rest of the pseudo-villains were just pushed even deeper, standing, almost no chance of getting out now. As far as it mattered, that front was as good as done. Students watched as an entire half of the challenge was soloed out of existence, and under a minutia hopeless situation turned very achievable in moments. Some stood in awe, the more experienced either cheering or using this to rally their search efforts with new energy. With the pseudo-villains almost entirely taken out, all that was left was just a measly 1/4 of the pseudo-villains, the group that Gang Orca had told to flank the first aid station. Alright, this is way more doable. Mina cheered as she finally arrived on the scene, smiling. With the first aid station being so close to the border, it took quite a while to reach it from the far side of the arena where most of the students were searching now. Finally the reinforcements were arriving in full, even if only to take out the last 1/4. Good to see you, Mina. Iida said as he arrived just a step before her, but quickly outpaced her. I'll be taking the far side, so reinforce the close side. All the students who got here were the high maneuverability types: Iida, Mina, Frappy, and others like them. Kaminari and Kirishima were bringing up the rear, bringing back their last rescues before they tried to join the front. The mood was generally good as the pseudo-villains took a quick pause, checking their orders now that they didn't have their leader, then moved forward to try their best. They still had the students outnumbered, and as it turned out, Gang Orca was still in the game. They just needed some water, then he'd be ready to go, although he was far from peak condition by now. The pseudo-villains' plan was very simple: spread out, get between the heroes and the people they had to save, and kill some of the civilians. The problem was that the villains lost all momentum. Now, the heroes were in high hopes after Bakugo's bombastic counterattack. From losing 2 strong heroes to defeating most of the villains, Revenant said as he looked up. A solid swing, and if the students pass, he'll definitely be the reason. But far too violent. It did not take a genius to see that most of the villains were already beaten, and Bakugo would be losing points for going too far. That attack very well could have killed a lot of people that he should have arrested. Only thinking about the fight, and not saving. Revenant shook his head. Bakugo had done it. He found the situation he was the best at, but then he'd gone too far and gone right past it to showing his worst side too. Well, this is the Hero Association. He'll probably just get a slap on the wrist. This seemed like exactly the kind of thing the Hero Association didn't care about. They were the guys who employed Endeavor, after all, and All Might had done plenty of extra damage back in his day. Of course, the match wasn't over yet, there still was a chance of failing, and if those kids got cocky, they could still lose. Those kids. HMPH. Revenant caught his thoughts, snickering and shaking his head as he patted himself down. This costume had too many pockets. Now, where did I put my drink? Chapter end notes. You gotta admit, Bakugo's the strongest. In 1A, he was able to keep up with a genetic bred super baby from the number 2 hero and his perfect mate and a quirk designed to beat the number 1 villain over multiple generations for months with the powers of good skincare and having sweaty palms. Canon Bakugo was a beast, plain and simple. Unfortunately, being a beast is not being a hero. I figured doing something like this was a great way to live up to my promise that I've been thinking about, showing character moments through fighting. Bakugo is one of the greatest fighters in UA. I can even think of ways he could beat Lemillion, but he is by far one of the worst heroes, despite Horikoshi's attempts to say otherwise and undermine the greatness he wrote accidentally. It's not a long chapter in truth, there's a lot of space because I wanted to give the readers time to soak in the image and literally space out each event, like a verbal slow panning camera on the scene and better divide the cuts between characters. I felt like this deserved multiple plops. Bakugo is so powerful, his attacks affect everyone in play. He's the only member of the big three who's comparable with his canon version. Midoriya isn't in UA, and with Todoroki refusing to use his fire powers, especially after the disaster that happened last chapter when he did, he's nowhere near as strong. Next chapter's the end of this little arc. As much as we all want to see it go on, the only thing left is to see how defeating the last squad of villains go, wrapping up the arc by announcing who passed versus who failed, and moving on to the next arc which no one knows what it could be, very mysterious. I felt like I wanted to end the arc in a chapter without beginning a new arc, and the ending ceremony isn't enough for its own chapter, so the final beatdown got shafted to next time to make it flow a bit better. I think that's all my thoughts on this one, a surprising amount supposing how little's here. My editor's taking a vacation, so thanks to them for their good work and a cheer for their good rest, then another for you who read all this. I hope you enjoyed Bakugo showing off exactly who he is in my eyes for better and for worse, but this is all I've got time for. Adios, amigos. Chapter 239, fuck him up. Chapter summary. Exactly how most of us assumed this would go. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Holy shit. The cameras panned over the destruction after the ad break they'd taken, scanning the scene of the battle between Bakugo and the battleground that the pseudo-Blaines had mistakenly put themselves between. The channels had already decided which clips to use, combining the two blasts into one to make it look less barbaric. They'd emphasized the destruction without the harm, how the ground broke and not how the people inside had made craters in the ground and broken limbs from the force, from sprains all the way to outright messy breaks. The Hero Association representative covered his mic, glancing back to the other supervisors. Want to end it here? That seems like a good cap. The cameras will like it. We could, but the brass won't like it. There's just a dozen civilians left and a small section of villains en route. Just let the villains peter out. We can use this as the ending footage for the public. Doubt we're getting a scene better than this, agreed the representative as he adjusted his mic, turning it back on. Gang Orca, you still there? I got great news, pal, you get to earn a little more pay. MPHM. Lucky me. The response had a bit of static as Gang Orca moved slowly, amazed at how burned he felt. His skin was as dry as a desert, the damage he felt amplified by the heat. He could only make little motions as he turned, freeing up his hip and grabbing a water bottle to pour on his head. Do they actually expect me to do anything after a beating that humiliating? Nope, just let your last team play out. Should be a good moment for the other students. Thank God, Gang Orca stopped pushing himself, cause that fucking hurt. Getting blasted twice by forces strong enough to break the ground, embed people into it, that was well beyond anything he expected today. He was ready to get burned. He brought plenty of water, but this was nuts. Still, he should give out his final orders, switching channels on his radio. Alright, gang, we're about to wrap this up. I'm spent, so I'll need you all to push yourselves hard for this finale. Make sure these students earn their victory. And above all, do it safely. I'll see you all during the wrap-up, so good work, even the new bloods. Gang Orca, over and out. The scene on the ground was high spirits for the students. At least 2/3 of the villains disappeared in 2 big blasts, including the number 10 pro hero. Bathically, it's a free win. Cheered Mineta, one of the loudest of the 1A clump. Most of 1A had stuck together throughout the exercise, with very few breaking off like Bakugo's little gang and Todoroki letting them work with the other students they were most familiar with. It's not free yet. Momo cut in, trying to move to a higher position to be better heard by her group. Everyone, the exercise hasn't ended yet, so there must still be civilians in danger. There might also be villains lurking. I want a team to scout out and finish the villains off, and the rest of us will keep pushing the rescue front. The organization took a bit longer than expected, because as students of UA, they had one big problem almost everyone wanted to fight. It's what they spent all their time training, why wouldn't they? For better or worse, it was a problem almost every group had. With rescuing being more of a subset of teaching compared to fighting, every student here had plenty of combat experience. It was a big focus in modern heroic schooling. Search and rescue, on the other hand, was a lot rarer relatively. From Ronin's position, he barely had to strain his neck to see 5 different groups arguing about it. It was one of the better groups. He'd been following Momo's lead all day, so they were predisposed to listen to her even if they didn't like it. Other groups lacked a clear leader, and so the debate quickly turning into arguing. When if the groups instead focused entirely on rescue, they'd probably be done in 5 to 10 minutes. But if the streets taught him anything, when you were counting minutes was when seconds mattered the most. All it took was one good villain. Oh, there was his bottle of Gatorade finally. Alright, we only need 5 or so students. The other groups are surely offering some support of their own. Momo muttered more to herself as she surveyed the team she'd made so far, with herself, Uraraka, Koda, Jiro, Shoji, and Mineta as solid picks of people who didn't want to fight villains. That left 10 students wanting to be competent. They only needed half that number. Come on, Momo, let me go wild, too. Mean about it, kicking a rock. All I've done all day is always hold back. Do you know how hard it is to create safe acid? It's acid. It's, like, not safe by definition. Isn't fruit juice a safe acid, Jiro? It is. Quote ... That's why you eat fruit stuff to recharge, Mina. Whack. Momo rubbed her head, aware that time was ticking while they argued. She needed to make some quick decisions, and for that, decide not just who'd be the best at fighting, but who would they could afford to lose from the rescue effort. Alright, sorry Mina, we need you for rebel destruction. Iida, Aoyama, Hadakuri, and Ojirio, I think you'll be the best for combat. Everyone else, you're too valuable to lose now. Those last few people are surely hidden the best and in possibly the most danger of all, otherwise we'd have found them already. Are there any questions? I'll do my duty fully and admirably. Iida shouted with his usual chopping motions, and Hadakuri gave a cute little backwood double thumbs up. Won't let ya down, Momo. Those who didn't get picked mope a bit, mostly Mina and Sato, with Zero laughing at their fellow plight and patting them on the back. Hey, cheer up, you heard the boss, we're too valuable to run off and smack some people. That's right, agreed Momo with a laugh, gesturing to those who were picked. That doesn't just mean we're more valuable, it means those who were picked were chosen because they're useless for rescuing Tilda. It was the combat's team to slump, realizing that not only were Monoma's words true, Momo had to agree since that's why she picked them. She was a bit flustered as she defended her choice with a much lighter tone, assuring them that it was that they weren't useful at this time, which is why they'd been chosen. Lucky bastards, mumbled Mina as she pushed her fingers together, taking a sidelong glance at the small pack of villains who had been steadily approaching the first aid station they set up. I mean, look how close they are. Wouldn't even take 5 minutes. We can defend ourselves, but our goal isn't to fight. We know Tilda, huffed the non-selected students with various tones, but even then, they couldn't help but glance back at the Peace Wado villains. It was a sorry sight, 20-ish villains. Class 1A almost had 20 members themselves. If they each took one villain, they'd be sure to win. They look lame, murmured Mina, using this more as a chance to vent her frustrations as the groups began to split. All the same uniform, all the same guns. Look, that one's original. He's got a pie Tilda eBay. Lucky him. Hey, at least if they keep coming here while we search, we can give them a piece of our minds. Zero nudged Mina as he ran past, setting up a quick trap to cover their flank, just a string of tape low to the ground, forcing anyone coming after them to watch their feet. I wouldn't be too upset, Maeve and the villains aren't taking this seriously anymore. Uraraka said with a shrug, beginning to use her quirk on objects so they could be safely and easily moved to explore deeper areas of rubble. She had a good amount of free time, since she wasn't lifting anything to avoid putting more strain on her, so she could easily turn and look at the villains. See, one of them is taking a snack break. Wish I could take a snack break, chuckled Sato as he checked his sugars, giving a quick reminder to the other emitters to start eating their own snacks. Mina some small beads of condensed juice and Zero fiber tablets. Currently, the three were relaxed, albeit various levels of myth. Sato and Zero helping lift with sheer muscle or using tape like ropes while Mina moved next to Uraraka, squinting at the approaching small pack of villains about to meet their group of combatants. So, what you looking at? Is our resident snacker eating anything good? And which one is he? Oh, he's right in front. See, it's the guy with the pipe you were talking about. Uraraka smiled as she pointed to one in the front, not just the front row but clearly a good dozen feet ahead of the rest, resting a broken pipe he must have picked up from the rubble on his shoulder and holding a bottle in his hand. Well, I guess snack's a big word. He's just drinking soda or something. Maybe an energy drink, like Gatorade. Three heads suddenly snapped up, all complaints gone and a cold sweat running down their backs before changing glances and laughing nervously. And no way, they wouldn't be, but if this is anything like the summer camp. They would totally. All three glanced over at the pack of pseudo-blanes, led by one particularly short and bulky villain. His face, hidden behind a cloth. He walked easier than the rest in armor, his stance with his sword, confident, and just a bit of skin visible. He pulled up his mask to drink from a bottle of Gatorade, but that wasn't the scariest thing. No, even the inch of scar peeking out, it was far too far for anyone to see that. But as he lowered the bottle from his lips, they could all see the worrying thing. He was smiling. That lead villain, armed with just a pipe, having ditched his glue gun, and outnumbered 5 tuned by the heroes, was smiling with an all too familiar cool confidence. How had Ronin gotten into the provisional license so easily, one might ask? The answer was easy. So, you want me? Ronin said right after he accepted Nezu's flash drive, and before they'd left UA. This was during Friday, the final day that Ronin had intended to train with Exam F, and right as they were being driven to the front gate after a long day's work. You want me to show up during the provisional license and beat the snot out of everyone? Yes, you get it. Nezu was talking excitedly, and had already pulled out the next thing, a pass to the provisional license coming bundled with a few instructions. I get the action. I'm not sure I get why you want me to do this, because this sounds like a horrible idea, Ronin had said, his mouth laughed, completely uncontained. Well, you see, every year the provisional license exam has a combat portion and I'd like you to be a part of it, Nezu elaborated, giving not nearly enough details for the vigilante. Isn't the combat portion done with robots, though? What, did you want to disguise me as one? It'll be obvious I'm not a robot. First off, you underestimate how good my disguises are. Secondly, don't tell anyone, but this year we're going to be using real people. Something about them wanting to rely on you less, but we've still got a lot of influence, Nezu explained, making Mao snort and mutter something about politics. The Hero Association is trying to minimize our control of the greater hero space, but we can use our influence to get a few people into the exam. We can't do any teacher state argue about biases, and say our teachers went too easy to let our students pass. But I am not a teacher, Ronin concluded for the rat bastard. Dis da bullshit you be talking that quote about? Mao whispered, leaning over. Ronin snorted. This is tame. Favors are a wonderful thing, Nezu concluded, smiling up at Ronin. If you do well, it raises our influence despite the association's meddling, meaning we can keep control over our own affairs and keep working with you. You're basically helping us to keep helping you. What I am, basically, doing is helping you to help yourself maintain your image, influence, and I assume budget. That as well. Even when called out, Nezu didn't flinch. If you do this for us, I'll do my best to keep you anonymous, not just here, but I'll help you deal with Yakuza from my end. You've never had a thing for paperwork, have you? Besides, we might have a big break coming up soon. I'd love to let you in on it, Tilda. You'd let me in regardless, Ronin said with a snort, but he took the pass and papers anyway, so who was the real fool? So, is there a specific reason they need me, or you think it'll help raise your reputation? Wheel Tilda, Nezu rubbed the back of his head, then leaned in conspiratorially. The upper management of the Hero Association is in a tough spot. They need to start controlling the incoming wave of heroes better, and they want to fail a lot of them. We need to make an ordinary seeming challenge to push this wave of students to be their best, to let only the best through. Secret selectivity, got it. In a weird sense, Ronin got IT probably better than he got anything, ever. This was the entire reason Ronin existed, technically. The Hero Association wanted exactly what he wanted, generally better and higher skilled heroes. Sure, it might have felt scummy to some to secretly be trying to make more students fail, but when lives were on the line, you didn't want flocks of morons on the ground trying to save people and fucking it up. Ronin wouldn't admit it, but he was hooked. Not by Nezu's offer, hell no, it was far dumber. Ronin had accidentally hooked himself, seeing exactly how this played into everything he wanted. He just had to go hard, making sure the weak heroes who couldn't keep up failed, forcing them to be better if they wanted to pass. Convincing himself of what Nezu wanted, damn, he was dumb. So what do you want me to do? Specifics, Nezu, we want details. Wheel, to keep you anonymous, you can't use any of your visible gear, but you could still probably get away with your body armor, Nezu explained with some enthusiastic paw-rubbing like the maniacal genius he pretended not to be. But the main idea is simple, here's like 50 goons, and you'll be filling in the extra slot to bulk up the numbers. You go in, pretend to be a goon, and try a little harder than most. A little. Alright, Tilda. Nezu held up his paws, laughing gently. Go in, fit in, and when you get the chance. How do they say it, Yakuza Hunter? Hey, Mao had laughed, all three of them already aware of what Nezu was really saying. Fuck him up. Ronin shook his head as he tossed the bottle up, getting ready to show these kids how real villain went down. He'd sat through the first round in the stands, moving down before the second round began for a brief overview with the other henchmen and even getting an awkward meeting with Gang Orca, one of the heroes mauled by Wraith. He listened to orders, he walked with the rest, he broke off from his group to run the fuck away the moment he saw Bakugo going, and that's how he survived this long. Now, he was in the last group with only a fourth of the original crew, no idea how to lead, and he was pretty sure nowhere near enough people had failed. He really was going to have to go all out to achieve anything significant. This is the weirdest thing I think I've ever done, he muttered to himself as he drained his bottle and wiped his mouth. He was wearing armor from the Hero Association over top his bodysuit, and thank God for the bodysuit, this armor was heavy and hot as hell. With the bodysuit's energy absorption, his body was kept nice and cool so he could output maximum effort, keeping him a step above most goons while looking virtually the same. They'd just gotten Gang Orca's orders, do their best, but try to stay safe. The old guard were discussing things as they moved, continuing to make progress even as they spoke. The general plan was to push forward, maintain direction and try to reach the first aid station. It wasn't great, it was obvious and the heroes would easily gather to stop them somewhere along the way. Ronin could see 5 clusters of students, already forming defensive walls as students rushed forward to stop them. What the group needed was the exact nightmare Ronin had run into twice now, the things the students would learn to fear just like Ronin did the secretly very competent henchman. While the showman hardly counted to anyone with a brain, that alcoholic guy in the small store was exactly what heroes should be most worried about, villains who appeared weak and unassuming but were actually very skilled. An incorrect assessment would lead to drop guards and unnecessary injuries, and right now, Ronin planned to capitalize on it for maximum impact. The students are starting to form up. 12 so far, and growing fast when the other students find out about us. If they find out, Revenant stated flatly, picking up speed and shouting back. Use the glue guns to pepper anyone standing around, you'll be frontline and push through. Start firing only once I've got their attention. Ronin didn't need to give orders or have authority, he was confident once he showed his skill, the rest would follow. Like one of the others said, there were 12 heroes on the scene, 3 from UA, and more coming from that last group who were still arguing who to send. At the moment the villains had the numbers, but it was unlikely that would last. Breaking out from the pack, Ronin sprinted, holding his pipe in reverse grip in his left hand and charging straight at the closest hero to reach them as quickly as possible. They were clearly a little thrown off, 2 students who didn't expect a single villain to charge right at them, but they recovered fast, preparing for a counterattack. They never got the chance. 1. Revenant muttered as he lobbed a rock at the further one to buy him some time, making them take just a second longer as he greeted the first with a sprinting shoulder check into a headbutt, then used them to body block the second's charging kick. He then punted the first into the second, letting them sprawl out over each other as he raised his pipe. 2. Glue. His backup did their jobs excellently. The second hero was barely injured, yet when their hands were encased in the cement like glue along with their dazed companion, they could barely struggle and had no way of putting in the force to fully break their way out. Perfect. Excellent, that is exactly what I want to see. Revenant's tone wasn't inspiring in optimism, but more in a strange experience. He had dealt with multiple opponents before, like the top 10 if using his biggest bragging immediately. His biggest problem had been his ability to damage them, to knock them around, but being unable to finish them both because he did not kill them, and he did not have the time to beat them unconscious or tie them up to remove them from the fight. These cement guns, however. 3. Iida was wondering when I'd start recognizing people. Ronin muttered to himself as the next person came sprinting in. Iida, one of the fastest in 1A if Ronin had his facts straight, easily outpacing his own teammates as he rushed in, no need to separate the pack if the pack did it for him. 2. Eager. Revenant kicked a rock up, then hit it like a baseball, Iida easily dodging it as he tried to go around Ronin to hit the backliners, but it was his duty as the head to hold the line, even if he was the front line. Iida was keeping close, not willing to lose speed, a simple mistake, as even Revenant could hit a still target. Shoot at me, he ordered through the intercoms, letting them figure out what that meant as Revenant put his faith in the bodysuit and left Iida's way, tackling his legs. He took a massive accidental kick to the ribs, getting launched back, but Iida stumbled an opening that the first few glue volleys took advantage of, hitting where Revenant had been and sticking Iida down suddenly. Good step by step. Keep the momentum. From one sweep to another, then back again. From gang work to sweeping 2 of the top students in the exam, then to Bakugo's reversal, and now into the small villain squads upset as they slowly pushed through the wreckage. Keep moving, keep the momentum. It felt wrong on some level as Revenant looked over his small pack, sticking in such a large group instead of breaking off on his own. This was not how he worked, not even with Ma giving orders, surveying a group. The only instructions he knew to give were move, stop, and shoot. It wasn't exactly a winning combination, a bunch of weaklings who were only getting by on their equipment, being led by someone whose entire style was being carried by the equipment he wasn't using. Against a whole pack of students trained mostly to fight. A hard climb, to be sure. Ronin stayed in the lead, pushing ahead but unable to go too far, otherwise, students would start attacking the group from the sides. The biggest upset was an accidental team up between 2 groups, attacking him from multiple directions at once. Hold them at gunpoint, Revenant called, focusing on 3 students at once. A second's hesitation is fine, hold them off as long as you can, I'll be there soon. Backline, on me, fire at will. Ronin acted as an anchor point. This biggest addition to the group wasn't necessarily his combat skills, but his sheer will to keep going even when the exercise had almost ended. Remembering Nezu's promises, but more specifically, his words drove Ronin to push himself as hard as he would for a mission of real importance. To make them try. The hero students came fast. There were many small bursts of activity, giving a lot of time for the villains to practice their coordination even as a few of them were taken down. Damn, one of the villains had said as they passed through the ruins of a skyscraper, already cleared by the students. Think we're actually going to do this? If we attack the rest center, it could mean the failure of the entire group, especially if we're not stopped. Good. Revenant took these motivation problems the same way he did the physical ones, directly, with nothing but facts. We are here to force the students to do their best. If they cannot go, they are not ready and they will not be pulling their punches when they hit us. Eyes up, I will not stand for any hesitating. Hilariously, Ronin guessed he was doing so well not only because his frequent sparring, thinking of his sparring made it much easier to get rough, but because this was exactly how he'd fight. Point a gun at a swarm of rushers to make them hesitate for an instant, exploiting the gap to hit them before they recover, then keep them on the back foot. Surprise angles, cheap tricks, this was great for him. There's the villains. I've got M. Stand clear. The problem was the group it went so far against his usual style. He couldn't run away, they were too big to hide, and most of them weren't physical enough to keep up with his acrobatic moves. They were a big anchor to him as well, in a far different sense than he was to them though. The group was taking a few hits each fight, and their numbers were beginning to slowly tick down. It was clear leading groups wasn't his field. Ronin's method to solve everything was to do everything. Calling for support, Ronin rushed to meet each cluster of students, then beat them himself. It went unsaid that someone capable of fighting Nomu could deal with the students, but again, the anchor pulled him. Revenant once took on 2 students at once in the middle of the skyscraper, putting himself between them to give them false openings. He put his back to one, striking the other overhead with his pipe lightly, then turning with a fluid elbow to strike the other in the stomach as they leapt at him. Their flailing knocked him back, but the damage was minimal compared to them doubled over and winded. He closed the distance quickly, striking them in the back to hit them into the ground, then moving on to the next spot to engage and to clear the area so his supports could glue his fallen opponent down. In a one-on-one fight, there was nothing worth talking about beating the student while they looked to their classmate, too distracted to see the pipe coming through their temple. Amateurs, you focus on combat, and yet, Revenant let it drift off as he rolled his wrist, spinning the pipe in a small circle, disappointed. This was quickly becoming a top 10 situation all over again. The disappointment tinged his voice, audible as he spoke to the group. Continue onward. We push until we reach the camp. They are where we are coming, but they cannot run forever. Geez, did they hire a real villain for the test? Revenant glared under his mask, turning away. This is about pushing the heroes to their limits. If it were easy, there would be no point in an exam. Keep pushing the heroes to their limits, shall see how they adjust. It wasn't long until the small group left the skyscraper, 20-odd students left behind, stuck in cement like glue. Their march continued, mostly unmolested. Of the 20 or so people they started with, they'd lost only 4 to surprise attacks. It was surprisingly high. Midoriya had never realized how bad he was at protecting people. Turns out, dodging attacks let them continue on unabated to hit your team. Rough. Plus, he couldn't be everywhere at once. Distractions. Revenant pulled himself together, ditching the anchor to run ahead. He jumped straight into an ambush from 3 students, only focused on the motions. 2 above, 1 on the side. Gotcha tilde. A student called as they pulled suddenly, a tripwire under his feet went taut, and something swung down from the side like a trap in some mythical dungeon. Revenant let his ankles go out from under him, doing a front flip to avoid going prone in the swinging rubble. His flip sent him deliberately crashing into an unsuspecting student heels first, both heels crashing into the student's shoulder before he backflipped off them to clear the space and stepping on a strange sticky substance, a multi-layered trap. How foolish of him, he should have dodged into a new area. Oh, Shutsudo, don't worry, this one will. Revenant barely even heard them as he suddenly spun, trying to get his feet up while attacking the nearest student. suddenly kicking with one foot to try and free it, twisting to get his other foot free, then throwing his pipe end over end at the further student to cause disruption. This flooring was like the glue gun Chad the student stolen one. It gave him a great idea. Zero, was all the other could get out as he lunged forward, arms reaching out. No defense. Now careful of the ground, Revenant treated this just like he would from leaping into him full force. He led with a jump kick to the stomach, turning the hero's momentum against him as he forced the massive student to exhale, his foot digging into the student's stomach so hard he almost doubled over. Off that great opening, Revenant grabbed the student like Mount at him, putting the big guy's weight against him to slam him into the sticky ground. Hard. Following his speedy takedown of a student who couldn't keep up with him, Revenant ran up and jump kicked the student right in the gut one last time, both to keep him down and to use the student as clear ground to jump off of, diving off his second victim straight back to the first, the tall one who was standing back, adjusting his arm set. It was Zero. Huh, where was Sato? He could have sworn they were usually together. Well. Zero was trying to do something as Revenant kicked his pipe up, the student's eyes naturally drawn to the flashy spinning object. Perfect opening for Revenant to grab Zero by the mask, then slam their heads together. The taller boy stumbled, his world zeroing down to just Revenant's new mask, unable to see as Revenant pulled back a leg and then kicked out Zero's. The arm pulling Zero into Revenant suddenly pushed him into the ground as his leg gave out. He fell like a sack of rocks, bleary-eyed and confused as Revenant towered over him. Revenant calmly planted a boot on Zero to pin him, then raised his hand and glanced upward. Catching his pipe just as it fell, then cracking Zero upside the head in one fluid motion the sword spun downward, was got, then swung straight into Zero's head before moving back, disengaging to prepare to fight. Oh, they were both down. Double O, look, it was Sato. They were still together, what good pals. Good idea, Revenant started as he began to move back to his group, careful to navigate over the tape covering the floor. But bad execution. Know your limits next time. They'd done alright, the trap was good. Would have gotten most, but he wasn't most. Another 2 students down. And wouldn't you know it, glancing ahead, Ronin could distinctly see more forces gathering. Thinking less about fighting himself, he was pretty sure he could see the search party dead ahead focusing only on fighting was one thing, but forgetting to set a rear guard. How unpro. His complaint stopped for a second as he looked at the winded and stuck Sato, then the concussed and stuck Zero. Ah, the rear guard. Well, luck was part of fighting and for once, it wasn't Midoriya drowning in the bad kind. He looked over at the students, one of the students not in his team looking over and nearly jumping out of his skin before gesturing wildly towards the villains. He glanced back at his team, finally catching up after he sprinted 200 meters, then looked forward, grinning under his mask. Luck is uncontrollable, but it's how we play off it that makes all the difference, Revenant summarized with a rare smile under his mask. Their mission clearly were to try making this exam as difficult as possible. How would they do that, exactly? Catch your breath, ready your guns, and follow my lead. He pointed his pipe towards them like a commander wielding their saber, letting his tone drift a touch more casual as he could see the panic even from this distance. He was enjoying this a touch too much, but damn did it feel good. He snickered, shaking his head slightly but never breaking line of sight on his target like a hawk. Let's fuck him up. Chapter end notes. Yo, so, there was a big toss-up between 2 main ideas for this chapter. Do I put Ronin into the exam or not? Originally I was going to, but I realized just how much longer that would make the arc take another chapter at least, especially if I continue what I've laid out not throwing Bakugo to the wind, trying to focus on the students and show growth. So, the tipping point was 2 points. 1, as my editor said when they phased out of the ether for 10 seconds, I started this to write fights. Skipping out on fights when I have ideas of how I do them goes against the whole idea. 2, this goes for exactly what Ronin was created for in universe, forcing heroes to be better by doing his best without a quirk, showing them that they could be better and not letting them settle for just being good when they could be great. Lastly, as like a 2.5, I had 2/3 of the chapter written before I really started debating including this, so it was faster to finish. I checked, but no one mentioned my favorite bit Midoriya's nebulous position. It was never clearly stated where Ronin was watching from once he got up, to give me ambiguity since even back then I couldn't decide if I wanted to do more fights or close out the arc. The idea behind the scenes was that Ken watched the first round from the stands, but before the second round started he went off to prepare for the entrance watching the next parts from the TV. Before the villains deployed, then only being able to see Bakugo during Bang Week is when he abandoned his post and ran to join the flank group cause he's not stupid enough to stick around for that. Zero and Sato really got the short end of the stick. They didn't stand much of a chance against Ronin not slowing down, acting like a zero pointer instead of a beatable enemy. Carrying off that, I feel Ronin's goal is a little strange, but it makes sense if we step back from Ronin's perspective, which we might next chapter. Ronin, in Ronin's eyes, is some quirkless guy who manages to win fights because he's cheating with multiple magic weapons and ambushes. People with super strength, durability, and other crazy quirks probably shouldn't lose to him, especially if he thinks they're failing the entire point of the exercise rescuing to waste time on doing what they want in disaster situations fighting, and especially when he doesn't even have any of his magic weapons. Anyone he's fighting is already failing. You can stall, you can defend, but the fact that you willing came to him is reason enough to smack some sense into you or at least give it his best. It's not like he thinks faster, has more combat experience than most third years, higher pain tolerance, and is generally a walking nightmare to fight. But of course, Ronin doesn't remember that much about himself. After all, these are second years and the best of the best. He's outnumbered, he can't sneak, he doesn't have his weapons, and he's stuck leading a group. He's definitely the underdog here. Definitely, he's not a dipshit at all. But that's that. Thanks to my editor for kicking my pants to remember what my goal is, the Discord for kicking my butt to write a chapter. Still going for 2 this month. Thanks for reading, y'all. Thanks to Ebony Bird of Doom for the guidance even when they're not editing. They're helping, but now I gotta run. Later, skaters. Chapter 240, the end of the provisional license exam. Chapter summary. The end of the provisional license exam, both the exam itself, the arc, and my patience with this thing. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. He's getting closer. Yeah, Momo, he's gaining on us. There was an air of chaos in the provisional license exam, lingering from Bakugo's blasts that the villains seemed to feed on. It started so simple, rescue people and stay clear of the problems. Now the problems were drawn towards them, like predators come to feed on the prey. Even as students, though, heroes weren't prey. Focus. Mina, you can't let him get in your head that much. We've run practices before, you've fought him before. Yee, and did I win? Even Bakugo can't beat Sensei Ken. It was an uphill battle to win back morale, to say the least. Momo took a deep breath, then switched focus to other members of her group. Any trace of the last civilians? Shoji shook his head, while Jiro confirmed it. Nope, looks like we're still covering someone else's ground. Those last civilians must be out far. They said the exam was to rescue the civilians, so the moment we've rescued them should be end of the exam. Momo theorized, maintaining a light jog to save energy. Running wasn't her forte, though, and you could see it in speed, and she wasn't the slowest in her group. They would have to fight. Sato, Zero, you've trained with Sensei Ken, do you think you could buy us some time? The two look at each other, the glances saying a lot. Honestly, Momo had no idea how they thought someone from UA was here in the provisional license exam. The biggest similarity she could see was their outfits were both starkly bland, but there was no way UA would have an inside man. This was a strictly neutral ground event, so no one from UA should be here to keep the event fair. Unless. I think I can give it a try, Zero said with a laugh, taking in their surroundings. I was one of the only to win my fight unlike someone Tilda. Oh, great, Mina smiled at him, taking the insult in stride. So you can have fun getting smacked around and read like a book, right? If it's really him, I can do my best too. Sato nodded, the pair slowing down to break away from the group. After all, I got some good wins against him, too. They fade back, picking their spot to where they'd ambush while the rest pushed on, spreading out to try and search. They got some 300 feet before the first pseudo-villain burst onto the scene, barely seeing Sato and Zero fall. They looked back then blinked. Zero sprung his traplines of tape along the ground, meant to slow down the entire pack of villains. It caught the first villain by the feet, supposed to stick him in place. Zero and Sato celebrated for just a moment too long as the villain calmly removed himself from the tape with an air of experience none of the pseudo-villains should have had, then smashed into the students mid-celebration. A quick distracting blow to Zero, giving Sato its full attention to beat him into the floor, then finishing Zero with a flashy flourish. Then blinked. Where did Zero and Sato go? Momo glanced back, straightening as her expression switched from focus to blank confusion, surveying how her classmates had been there 1 second, then the next. Just one guy. Some rough-dressed pseudo-villain. There were 20 just like him standing in the distance. Bland, boring, doing some practice squats like an old man preparing for a workout. No, what? Seriously, where did Zero and Sato even go? It couldn't have been more than 10 seconds. Heth gaining on UTH. Again, some people have never looked away. Mineta and Nina, both nervous about the villains of this one in particular, hadn't stopped looking back. Maybe they knew what happened to Zero and Sato but now wasn't the time. Then keep moving, Momo directed, looking over who they had and feeling the pressure mounting. Most of the combative students had gone to fight the main force, which had become pointless because of Bakugo. It'd be a wonder if any of them did anything. They had sent out some great students, though, like Iida and Miyama. What'd she do for one of them? But it was no matter. I know this is a bit late, but isn't running super on superhero why? Uraraka glanced back. That one guy was still ahead of the rest. I mean, compared to the villains of the USJ or the Nomu in the forest. What are you, crazy? Mina ran next to Uraraka, letting her panic run faster than her legs. That guy just took out Zero and Sato in like 2 hits each. But we're not losing them. Uraraka glanced back again, pointing. He's faster than us, and he's just gonna catch up. It's not like Jiro and Shoji can search while we're running, so. To think the exam would have something like this. Momo almost seemed to stumble, then deliberately slowed down to her friend's horror. She rubbed her chin, sorting her thoughts, then looked over the group. Uraraka's right. Jiro and Shoji aren't making any progress right now, but I didn't think the exam would force something so drastic. Drastic. Quote. Momo, you're scaring me. This is an exam, it's meant to be solved, Momo explained, then directed her attention to giving her order state explain most, and she could fill in the blanks. Jiro, Shoji, spread out and keep going. We need to find those last survivors. We're splitting up. Jiro was a little surprised that it was a brilliant plan, but it made sense when you stopped panicking. Guess if they're being led by one guy, splitting their attention 2 ways isn't too bad. Almost. Everyone, inside those ruins stat. Momo directed everyone away from their goal, off to a broken building, putting some difficult terrain between their group and the villains that the villains would have to waste time going around. Large rubble, exposed metal, and a harsh climb that only one, the lead one, seemed to leap over, gaining on them. Momo ushered her small group inside, beginning to make items rapidly. Barricades, a classic, backed with metal coils, smoke and flash grenades, and a surplus of backup materials. Shoji, Jiro, take separate exits and run looking back. Everyone else, grab a barricade. We have a minute at most. Nice, some defenses. The students began moving under their leader's command, setting up some brief defenses while Shoji and Jiro moved off a little confused, not fully aware of the stakes their leader was seeing. This ought to stop him for a minute. There's a lot of grenades. Yeah, a lot of grenades, Jiro, murmured Froppy, glancing at an increasingly thin Momo who kept making things rapid fire, with no hesitation. Are you sure all this is necessary? Of course. The goal isn't to beat the villains, it's to save civilians. You're Ravity, great brush, set up more around the front windows. Momo answered confidently, surveying the scene, trying to take it all in at once. Froppy, can you help them? The goal is to hold the villains back as long as possible. Great brush, be ready to use your quirk. I thought thought about rethinking Diblianth, not building a fortress, muttered a disaffected Mineta, drilling a weightless barricade in before Uraraka turned off her quirk, and he kicked it to check its give. It was. But now, that's Jiro and Shoji's job, Momo explained, the horror of her words not quite reaching everyone yet. Froppy was one of the first, as usual. Kiro, then what are we doing? The goal of the exercise is to save civilians, and we have to do our part however we can, even if that means we can only hold back the villains to buy more time. Clarified Momo as she finished her own setup, looking over her handiwork with the grenades, tripwires, and a few other surprises. She was spent. She resembled more like a skeleton than her usual reserve self, having used all the fat in her body in advance just in case she went down early. I can't rescue the last civilians in time myself, but if I make my last stand here, I'm sure I can buy the others enough time to search a few more areas. TH gonna be a laugh THTAND. That feels a little dramatic for a test. Blinking at the idea, Uraraka looked to the others. The villains would be here anytime, and sure the students would fight, but a last stand. Yeah, it's pretty flashy. But if this is anything like UA. Mina trailed off, sharing a look with Uraraka before they both shuddered, realizing this was definitely something UA would try if they could. In fact, would it be too far to say UA sent Ronin to push them specifically? This exam isn't meant to see if we're ready to be heroes, theorized Froppy as she picked her own spot, giving her 2 cents as her camouflage began to settle in. It's to see if we can be the types of heroes Japan needs right now, Kiro. Testing to see if we'll put ourselves in danger to help civilians seems pretty. All might why. Though they deliberately put in Tomi expert heroeth to kick UTH around. To the what kind of heroeth we are. Man, these clad really ITH youth like UA, Mineta said, starting out shouting before settling into his fate, pulling 2 balls off his head and giving one a test toss. Thinking we're gonna lose isn't the greatest mentality, guys, Uraraka said as she tried to cheer up Mina, then looked around the place. But I guess if we're gonna go down swinging, we better give it our all. Guys, I'm gonna give it my all. Guys, I'm gonna. Mina and Momo looked on slightly wistfully as Uraraka pumped herself up, like she'd done before the UA Sports Festival, then got to work setting up their final defenses in the few seconds before the villains arrived. Ronin wondered if he had gone a bit too far. This was the final big test to become heroes. As long as they did nothing to lose their licenses, they could be fully fledged heroes in 1 year to the day. On the other hand, he did beat 2 kids senseless in less time than they could get out 2 full sentences. Was it weird that he was starting to really think of them as younger than him? The parkour training was especially useful today. His body handled the physical problem of tracking the students, his mind the mental one. He should have given them more openings. It was exactly like training with Mao. Sato could barely keep up with 30%, of course he'd be crushed at 60% of Revenant's full force. It was twice as fast as they'd ever gone. To push them to their limits, then a touch for that's the goal, he muttered as he ran up, then jumped off rubble bits of outer wall forming large jagged blocks. Not so different from the foam blocks he practiced on inside the gym. Soft, crumbling, it could be similar enough. Not to beat the shit out of them. Too much. Find, match, and surpass the students' efforts. But the goal was to save civilians. Not to fight him. To punish people who forgot their goals. This felt acceptable. Not too much, but to make the point clear. A clear goal. Landing softly on what had been a street, he was standing in front of a ruined office building, the classic kind that he'd swept through chasing the Yakuza. There'd be a lobby for receiving people, a relatively larger space, then branch off to a hallway that'd break off into smaller rooms, the style used to save room in the cramped quarters of an inner-city building. He took a final moment to look over the pipe, making sure it'd still hold up, then glance around for an alternative. Nothing, so he had better make this pipe count. Unfortunate. With that done, he began to move in quietly. Using some of his insider knowledge, he counted off the students. Bakugo was nowhere near here. Todoroki had been taken out 2 minutes ago, and he had beaten Iida, Aoyama, Ojiro, Shiro, and Sato. That left his combatants Kirishima and Kaminari, his favorites, Tokiyami, and Maybe Suyu. His studies had focused on exam F, not the rest of the class, but he had vague memories of the frog-themed heroine being skilled. There was no sight of Kirishima and Kaminari, though, leaving Tokiami and Suyu as the major combative force, backed up and supported by indirect types. The office's one remaining door swung open, revealing an empty hall. All as expected. Suyu and Tokiami seemed more likely to ambush, like he would. If they would fight, they would wait for him to get into a good position while was a pillar swinging down from the ceiling. Ronin got about half a step in and almost threw 2 whole internal sentences inside the building before Uraraka released her quirk. Starting at the first thing Ronin noticed, there was a pillar suspended to the ceiling, hanging off a pair of strange strings made of purple balls. He barely had enough time to calculate that the balls were from Mineta before his expectations were challenged. The pillar wasn't being held to the ceiling by the balls, but Uraraka's quirk was making it weightless. There was a flash of pink as it regained weight, then fell in the blink of an eye. The strings of balls were attached, guiding it swing down straight into him like a classic log trap. Barricades had been set up to either side, stopping him from sidestepping before he even tried. Too big to step under, leaving only 2 directions. He took too long to safely get up, so he'd have to make good with plan B. Wham! The students watched and as their intro worked better than they could have hoped. The first villain entered quietly, and before he even noticed what was happening, Uraraka released her quirk. The pillar suspended up dropped like a pendulum and worked like a charm, swinging straight into him and, by the sound, sending him flying. Damn, that was awesome. That was physics, stay focused in language. There'll be more, and if the villain survived Bakugo's attack, it might not be enough. Can't we hope a little? Muttered Mineta, keeping a ball in hand from his vantage point. True to Ronin's theory, the students hadn't used the large open space, they were outnumbered. Instead, they used barricades to turn it into a funnel. They gave a clear entrance, inviting the villains through the front door with the other windows bolted shut, then would pummel them as much as possible. With any luck, it might take 4 or 5 villains at once to stop the pendulum mid-swing, or they might catch the students at a bad time, such as rearming. Alright, I'm gonna reset it, cover me. Uraraka whispered to no one in particular as she moved from her hiding spot, the closest to the trap. She had to be, running over quickly and touching the pillar to return it to being weightless, then running back as a long tongue shot past her, grabbing the back of the pillar and pulling it back to finish rearming the trap, but as it pulled up, they could see someone pass the doorway. The first villain seemed to take the first hit center mass. It was hard to see with the pillar in the way, but he landed well. Too well. Alright, guys, don't bother with a second time, let's move to plan B. When Ronin had seen the pillar hurtling towards him, he realized he only had one viable direction to dodge. Backward. Jumping back, Ronin fell away from the incoming pillar and raised a leg. It almost scraped against the ground as it swung. Yaoyorozu was in this group if he remembered right, but it didn't matter that it left him no space. The large surface hurtling towards him was plenty fine for jumping off. Once, Ronin had dodged an attack from a weird female Nomu. She had tried to throw a punch strong enough to instantly kill him if it landed, but he survived by jumping away before she punched, leaping off her arm and turning it from a punch that would have instantly killed him into a shove that almost instantly killed him, instead instantly breaking a lot of bones and leaving him to bleed to death in a few seconds if medical hadn't been on standby. The pillar was no female Nomu. Ronin kicked off the incoming pillar, launching himself far faster than anticipated, but surviving road behind him and the bodysuit around him turned what could have been a new set of broken bones into barely a bruise, landing roughly on his back, flipping over once, then turning it into a proper backflip on instinct more than conscious effort. He looked at the office with new eyes as he rolled his shoulders, advancing back towards the doors and looking it over. There were higher floors, so a higher entrance could get him in at the cost of more time, but was this a plan to take him out in one hit? No, the barricade, that kind of huge range trap, this was meant to hit multiple people. This trap was meant for the villains trailing behind, to take out several of them at once. He could defuse large hits like those of very simple kind, with opponents who weren't pulling any tricks like an annoyed Nomu or nonsense end trap. The other villains, though. The students have set up a trap. Continue advancing to my position, I will handle it. Ronin moved in quietly now, kicking his pipe off the ground and catching it midair, then taking a practice swing to get a better grasp of the weight. Slightly heavier at the tip, too heavy to be a good sword but a great hammer for the nails he had to flatten. Coming in, the trap was much more obvious now, could see the pillar clearly, suspended a good 4 feet overhead. One end was stuck firmly to the ceiling, the other held loosely to let it swing. Ronin glanced at the ground ahead, checking his time, then dashed in. Not even half a second from outside the entrance to pass the pillar, clear of the trap. The dash put Ronin in deep, at the whims of any other traps, but he was confident Uraraka had been used in that first trap, and she couldn't subdivide her attention to make multiple of those traps. He should be clear of that, so he had to take in the scene. It was a lobby like he thought, a receptionist's office to one side, leading to a hallway with flying purple balls. The analysis was cut short as a massive cloth with one side covered in purple balls took over Ronin's attention. It was thrown, so there was likely a person further down the hall, but he hadn't gotten that far yet in actually processing anything he saw. Reacting to this overtook learning more about that, so the current issue how to dodge this one. Back led to the pillar trap, so this one led Ronin to move sideways, then further sideways as more purple balls emerged from the dark before the cloth even hit the ground. It was a shaky throw, but that was probably Mineta throwing to keep disrupting him. Good way of maintaining momentum, but blind attacks were not enough. As the blanket hit the ground, turning a large section into a sticky trap, Revenant moved further off to the side, taking in the hallway as he dodged the thrown projectiles like dodgeballs. He could make out 2 figures throwing the purple balls were some of them decoys. Perhaps he misunderstood how Mineta's quirk worked if someone else was handling them, but now was time for dodging. He kept moving to the side, making out one of the throwers to clearly be Mineta by height, but the other person could have been anyone. It was impossible to know seeing just an arm, but they were throwing blindly. It made them both easier and harder to dodge. Mineta peeked occasionally, but the other person threw so randomly that even he was unsure where the balls would go until they were halfway through the air. He got his break as he moved far enough to one side, the vantage of the hall blocking the 2 sides, but one of them kept throwing balls for a second longer. Could it be Kota, the quiet kid who could talk to animals? Revenant had no idea how the quiet boy would be throwing Mineta's balls, but it was an option. Oh, who was he kidding? Anyone could be throwing those things and it hardly mattered. Instead, he should take a second to regain his bearings. The lobby behind him was turned into a war zone of traps, some kind of Russian doll strapped to the sealed windows, probably to do something if you tried to move through the barricades. There was definitely more in the hallway, things on the floor. Landmines, maybe. Tripwires. Either way, Yaoyorozu was definitely here, never mind the sheer amount of strange items. No one else in UA could think up such a shrewd plan as turning this checkpoint into a death trap. He loved it. Unfortunately, breaking into places people didn't want him was his job, and reversing this problem into his own trap was easy. The heroes have rigged the building, go around it. Keep advancing to the medical bay, Revenant whispered into his radio, smirking under the mask. It was a great plan, but there was clear flaw no bait. Revenant had come in mostly because he felt invited, but he could admit it was illogical. The better option would have been to stay clear, and now, he would make his exit once he was sure he could move without getting pinned by Mineta and the other thrower. He glanced over, checking out what the floor had turned into a mess and planned his way out. Keeping his eye on the attacks would be difficult, he would have to leave backward. Perhaps it was in his best interest to stay here, since if he tried to leave backward, he might step on a ball, then would have fucked himself. Why was the pillar glowing pink? The pillar flashed as Uraraka's quirk was released, swinging down and closing off to shut him in, the pillar taking up so much of the entrance, there was no way he could go through it unless he could lift the thing. He heard voices from down the hall. We did it. He's stuck in here. No, you were stuck in here, Revenant called back. Demoralizing was not strictly necessary, but on the other hand, he did just fall right into their trap like an idiot, so it'd make him feel better. With me. The students waited with bated breath. They seemed to have the villain cornered, literally stuck in a corner. With people borrowing Mineta's gloves so they could handle his hairballs, they had the perfect trapping tools, and only one way to goth hallway. The star of the show, Mineta, handed another ball to Kota. By sheer accident or great deduction, Ronin had correctly pinned both attackers' identities as they huddled in a room, prepared for the suicide show by moving away from each other. The plan was simple: to take him down, even if they had to get a little bruised to do it. There was only one way forward, that hallway, so either he stayed in the corner or moved down it straight towards them. When he moved down, they just had to dive out. One of them was bound to get him. As long as he didn't teleport, they couldn't think of a good counter for that one. Think Heth coming. There's no way he'll wait forever, but he'll probably get a plan before he moves. Momo was pushing herself to her limits, using as much of her quirk as possible, snacking where she could to try and regain some energy, guiding the team, and on top of all that, she was the one trying to read the villain. She was the brains of the operation. Who else could predict what he'd do? He doesn't seem to be using his quirk. If he is, it's likely a strength, speed, or durability enhancing one. Possibly multiple. Unless he's waiting to use his teleport to sneak up on us. Mina, we still don't know it's Ronin. We have to focus on what we do know than throw out blind theories. Momo tried explaining with so much on her plate, she couldn't let herself be caught in theories of what if. There'd be infinite possibilities if she gave him any manner of quirks, so she needed to lock in what she knew, then figure out what came next. Think, if she was some sort of great martial artist like he seemed making the Ronin claim. No, focus. If she was like him, what would she do in this situation? Waiting them out felt too passive, and he had told his team not to come as she'd heard it. Waiting out played to their advantage. She knew it, he knew it, and they knew each other knew it, so it couldn't be just waiting. But what could he do? She glanced out from her cover. He had no extra equipment to use as a shield, so he'd be taking Mineta's balls head on. Was he fast enough to dodge, or hit them away with that pipe? Unlikely. If he was, why hide or take cover? No, that couldn't be solution, but he was moving too much to have no ideas, leaning against the wall and pressing his ear against it, then pulling back. The wall. Momo spoke a little louder than intended, giving away her position a bit, but it was urgent. He's coming through the wall. What? The others cast curious glances, their inability to see the villain literally blinding them as they paused to try and register, but the villain didn't hesitate, having taken one step back, muttering to himself, then shoulder checking the wall. There was an explosion of plaster as Ronin tried his hand at what he thought was his best out, going straight through the wall he'd been leaning against into the next room. They had fortified the lobby too much, and had he known Mineta was here, he probably never would have gone in, but even if his bed was made, he'd refuse to lie down. Not yet. His first idea was a shoulder check like Mao, and when that failed, he punched through it, grabbing the other side and pulling himself the rest of the way through, showering plaster across the room and confusing the students who'd been sitting on the other side. After his previous fail, he did a quick scan of people first. Koda, animals. Uraraka, gravity. Mineta, found you. No one else was as high priority as Ronin sprinted in, punting Mineta across the room and making him hit the ceiling, sticking there like a dart in a board by his own sticky hair. Ow, wait, I'm stuck. Ronin then continued his look over the student Suyu. Frog then broke his analysis to dodge and parry her tongue with his pipe. Mina, acid. Tokyomi, shadows. Tokyomi was the highest priority, drawing dark shadow and moving to fight until he noticed Koda running towards him with a splash of purple in his hand. Why was a non-combative student running towards him? Purple. Mineta, one of Mineta's balls. Pivoting away from the charging blackbird, Ronin resigned himself to taking some hits as he advanced on Koda first, striking the boy's wrist with his pipe to move the sticky trap away from himself safely, then sidestepping and kicking Koda in the back. With wrists knocked down and his back suddenly kicked, Koda lost his balance, slipping on his face as he tripped and landed on the ball. He was down. The ball would keep him to the floor long after this fight ended. Now, the next. After confirming Koda was down, Ronin continued to backpedal, buying about half a second as Tokyomi and Dark Shadow advanced on him, slowed by now having to go around his fellow student and Ronin's backpedaling. Dark Shadow led the advance with big swings, laughing as it struck out, making Ronin backpedal more as he parried its claws. It seemed bigger than usual, and quite strong too. It was not enough. Tokyomi himself didn't do anything to support Dark Shadow assigned to him and now had better teamwork than some people. He couldn't resist trying to teach now, it was too obvious. Stop standing around. Ronin abruptly stopped backpedaling to shoulder check Ascension Shade, weaving between its claws, then going for his real target Tokyomi. With one hand, he swung under Dark Shadow, striking Tokuyama in the body. The boy took it very well, barely flinching to Ronin's surprise. He did have a cloak on, was there body armor underneath it? Then he would shift to a different body part, the unguarded one, the face. So close now, Revenant had no trouble weaving through another attack, rolling under Dark Shadow's claw to fake a strike to the body, switching at the last second to strike Tokuyami's face, and instead revealing that the student was a lot more than he had given them credit for. As Revenant switched from body to face, Tokuyami's eyes widened a fraction, then a sudden wave of darkness rose up to block it. Tokyomi had shifted Dark Shadow, wrapping his quirk around his body to protect himself like body armor. It was body armor. Finally, someone listened to him. You talk. Tokyomi mocked as he shifted into Ronin, using the shoulder check move, then Dark Shadowing, branching off Tokyomi, hit Ronin even harder and pushed him further back. Dark Shadow finished by grabbing him by the armored shirt the villain team was required to wear, trying to hold him in place so he couldn't dodge anymore, and closing out with a massive swing. No, I concentrate. Revenant glanced at the claw holding him, rode off removing it, and went with grabbing it and spinning while moving backward to crash into the lobby, specifically the part covered in Mineta's sticky trap. Unfortunately for Dark Shadow, it landed on the bottom, getting pinned to the floor while Ronin kicked off and rushed the now exposed Tokyomi. Then, I win. The student made a great effort of using Dark Shadow's stretched body to block several hits, positioning it between himself and Revenant, but defending would not stop Revenant's attacks. After attacking being blocked at most angles, Revenant tossed the pipe like a projectile at the other students, then grabbed Tokyomi with his bare hands and smashed their heads together, then got a beak smashed into his. Damn, maybe he could try training with Yokoyami the next time he went to UA. The fight turned into a close-range headbutting competition, cracking the villain mask as they danced around, vying for control until Revenant turned his pull into a push, throwing Tokyomi down on the sticky balls. Those things really were his saving grace. At this point a trap was only useful as long as you were in control of it. 3 down, Revenant snapped around with a spinning back kick, assuming someone was coming behind him and taking Mina by the thigh, having not raised his leg enough for a good body hit. 3 to go. Something in it felt wrong, perhaps Mina trying a direct attack. Her specialty was hit and run and beast and her quirk too dangerous to be used directly against villains. She was clearly spooked, likely having deduced his identity. Few fought in the industry like him, hero or villain. He could work with that fear. Mina rubbed her leg, a little sore but manageable, then came in with a haymaker again. Ronin hadn't seen someone try that on him since Mina did in the UA summer camp. It was a huge, exaggerated punch, but it was likely trickier than it looked because Mina was trickier than she looked. To counter Mina's big punch, Revenant countered by stepping in to deliver a much faster, compact punch before she landed hers, barely surprised when Mina's feet suddenly slid out from under her, turning what had appeared to be an exaggerated haymaker into a dropkick that he took to the legs. With Beowulf, this would have been nothing. Right now, Revenant expected it would do nothing until his legs slipped out from under him easily, reminding him this was not his usual uniform as he fell down. Mina only realized at the last second how bad of an idea that was, going from cheekily confident to visibly panicking as Revenant fell on her like a sack of bricks and making a tangled mess of limbs. There were still other students, but their lack of coordination meant they had been going one at a time and it was in Revenant's best interest to keep them fighting that way. He had to take down Mina before Uraraka or Suyu wisened up and joined, so he went straight into what little he knew about grappling from Mao. He had heard much but practiced little. It was hard to try when your opponent was so much bigger than you. He started by planting his arms, rising slightly to make sure Mina was underneath, before suddenly headbutting down. He didn't want to try headbutting the floor. Mina's head bounced like a pinball between his increasingly cracked mask and the floor, but still wasn't down, groaning in pain, but it seemed enough for now. Then something like a long, thick rope wrapped around his body. Ah, there was Suyu. Suddenly, he was the one flying around the room, lifted up into the ceiling, the floor, one wall, then the next, battered in every direction by the froggy hero, and as she lifted him with only her tongue. He'd marvel how impressive it was, but he was busy putting new dents into the room. Bam, bam, bam. Nice, Tsuyu. Someone cheered at a girl, probably Uraraka, instead of Yaoyorozu, because he hadn't seen her. Wait, why hadn't he seen her? Ronin refocused as he was lifted towards the ceiling, using this time to survey the place. Mina was getting up, Uraraka was cheering to one side, and Froppy was concentrated on him, so where was Yaoyorozu? He'd been so overwhelmed, he hadn't questioned it, but he was sure she was somewhere full offense intended, but these guys weren't smart enough to make this ambush on their own. Oh yeah, the metal barricades and wires used in the log trap, too. Sick of getting shaken around, Ronin didn't brace for the ceiling and grabbed at it, first hitting a light, then grabbing and pulling himself into its broken bits. He was shocked a bit, but it mostly redirected into Tsuyu for consequence of being the grounding in his metal bodysuit. It hurt, but it wasn't too much to Ronin wasn't the one sticking a wet tongue out, and expected it, unlike poor Tsuyu, who flung him down, recoiling at the shock. Attacking blindly means you don't even notice your flaws. Ronin spoke as he landed pretty gracefully, rolling to defuse the blow, then going straight for Tsuyu with a full sprint. Uraraka tried to get in the way, grabbing at him, but he lifted her like a rugby player and tossed her to the side. She had gotten him his outer layer of clothes was now weightless, but it did little to stop his rush as Tsuyu jumped back, only to be grabbed by her tongue while she was trying to retract it. They were pulled into each other, but Tsuyu wasn't ready used to her mobility being unchallenged. Ronin not only started it, but did it every day. He really had to think of a name for this move. Later. With a confident grip and a sharp tug, Revenant held on as Tsuyu pulled her tongue in and jumped back, riding with her and careening towards her. He landed a solid knee to her stomach midair, then kicked her down as he grabbed the ceiling. She landed slightly doubled over on her back, and fully doubled when Revenant dropped from the ceiling on top of her with both feet, making sure to put some good weight into it before stepping back, pivoting, and cracked into their arms like home run swings, then crashed into their unprotected bodies, throwing the heroes and heroines around like ragdolls. It didn't even take a minute for him to take down 2 more students, but the conflict was over with their regained presence. The villain slowly nailed down the remaining 6. Doing a head count and telling the heavily injured to stay back or refuse, to his pride it was time to push on. The villains had gotten through most of the ruined city district by now. Heading to the edge, they had reached a large, open expanse of dirt and cliffsand. There it was. Some 100 or 2 feet away, a clear camp amidst the dirt and ruin. The target, their goal, their endgame. Ronin finished a final check. He made sure all the students were properly stuck by the villains' glue guns, grabbed a surprise for later, then joined the rest at the lip. This is it. We clear this distance. We're home free. There's no way the students can defend the pseudo-civilians and themselves at the same time. I want reserve trigger fingers until we reach the camp. Every shot is important, so no spraying and praying. We've got a mission. Now, regarding the final hurdle. Ronin turned away from the crew, but he couldn't make out any particular faces in the crowd from this distance. But he was sure he was there, and would probably be the end of Ronin's run. Katsuki Bakugo UA's strongest. He'll be a hard hurdle to clear, but we have to find a way to clear the gap without getting blown up. Luckily. With a little effort, Ronin lifted the thing he picked up, or, rather, who he picked up. One of the students had their arm covered in glue, sticking their arms together instead of to the ground. They were defenseless, or as Bakugo would see, a civilian. I think we've got just the key to get in. The villains marched over the gap with one figure held prominently their hostage, one foe the students who was supposed to be taking the test, and being damn loud about it. With one hostage, suddenly, the heroes couldn't hit them with such big attacks. Ronin could immediately pick out Bakugo from high above, previously blocked out of sight by the rebel, but now screaming loudly in annoyance before diving down, pissed probably both at the cheap tactic and the fact that one of the heroes was so weak they let themselves get captured. Bakugo would likely try to go for area attacks, trying to take out clumps, so it was important to beat him to the punch. They had to reach the first aid camp or whatever it was called ASAP, but there were always problems. Ronin led the charge as some of the heroes broke off from the camp. A wave of hair trying to swat them back was the most noticeable. It was the final big scuffle to get to the camp, with a wave of heroes pushing against a wave of villains. The numbers were equal, but the skill levels couldn't be more different. On one hand, these villains worked with gang orca, part or full-time. They were great, as long as they had a leader. They were, though, only sidekicks, practically none using their own quirks, instead relying on numbers and their team tactics individually. Ronin could have beaten them even faster than he beat most of the students. In contrast, the students had almost no group coordination, all individual skill. The groups weren't different in total amount of skill, but where it was placed with one exception, of course. Ronin dominated every fight he was in. He figured they had about 20 seconds before Bakugo arrived, most of which was Bakugo being angry before he locked in and crushed them. He had grabbed a glue gun, keeping it on his belt as he ran ahead, but he wasn't just fighting. No, he had stolen Mina's tactic. He was just running. Ronin went straight for the camp, pushing ahead and only pausing to disrupt some of the heroes. There was a student who was a mass of hair that Ronin took it upon himself to disrupt, running vaguely towards before sharply turning and entering a dead sprint at inhuman speed to beat down. He jumped several feet in the air over a swinging limb of hair, pole vaulting with the quarterstaff over top, then landing with his signature headbutt. The student was rattled, especially when Ronin closed the distance going for barehanded combat, aiming it all at the face to get him to defend before sweeping the student's legs while he couldn't see. All it took then was a few glue shots to keep him gunked to the floor, then to continue running now with his glue gun drawn. Ironically, they were running out of students. 30 here, the 40 or so he had beaten along the way, including large swaths of 1A. The rest were probably scattered about, trying to rescue more, unaware the whole operation was about to fail. He glanced up, seeing Bakugo actively shooting down to try and get to the ground faster. Bakugo would have to slow himself down, otherwise he'd splat. It bought him more time to run, so he needed to get to the civilians faster, and why was he suddenly falling to the ground? Revenant felt something grab the back of his head, someone running up behind him and trying to throw him face first into the ground. Moving with emotion, Revenant did a front flip, landing on his feet and drawing his gun on whoever tried to steal his moves to see Mina Shido. It warmed his heart a little to see her having come back, but this felt a little late. Bakugo to hear in seconds. Done running away, Revenant said flatly as instead of running, he stood his ground just a small ways away from Mina as she turned with a slide like riding a skateboard. He evened out his feet, taking aim not at Mina, but at the camp. It should be close enough to hit someone. What advice should he give her? You're too late. You should have rallied with the other heroes. Alone, you can't stop a gun. Yeah. Mina stood a little too confidently as Ronin became vaguely aware of a sound behind him, a roar, like from an engine, and a sudden flip as his world went sideways, someone kicking him in the side and launching him across the dirt close to a dozen feet before he rolled to a stop. That's why I didn't fight alone. Ronin struggled to his feet, glancing up at Ida. Ronin took a deep breath, forming his plan. He'd dive into Ida's legs, then shoot him once the student tripped, trapping. Wait, he had already done Tisho with Ida. Glancing back, Ronin could see over the field as his team of villains was getting beaten, but not by the last wave of hero students, no, but by people he was sure he had glued to the ground. When Mina got her ass handed to her, she was sure of 2 things. 1. The villain they were fighting. Definitely Ronin, 1,000,000%. 2. Ronin. She could not take Ronin. This wasn't the one she trained with, the one giving casual advice, letting them repeat and retry moves. This was the real Ronin going all out to slam them and their grades down as hard as he could. So, she played dead. Originally, her plan was to jump Ronin when his back was turned. Maybe that would work, especially since he loved headbutting stuff and his mask was cracked, but then he just manhandled Tsuyu. And Uraraka. Fuck. No. Fuck. That. So Mina played dead a bit longer. She cursed when she got gently punted onto Minetta's gross ball things, trying to wiggle her way off before realizing she could totally just burn through it. While Ronin monologued, Mina began to shift quietly, glancing over and quietly creating a bit of acid to burn the stupid purple ball, then getting stuck to another one, cursing how many of these damn things there were. By the time Ronin had finished Minetta, Mina was about free, but there was only Momo left. Momo glanced at Mina from her hiding spot. The plan was for Momo to contact them over radio, but that'd be way too obvious now, so a few glances was going to have to do. Momo glanced at Ronin, Mina glanced at Ronin. Momo glanced at something past Ronin, then again, and finally Mina saw it not Ronin, but the hallway obviously beyond him. Mina's eyes went a little wider, but before she could ask questions, a pipe suddenly flew over her head. She yelped that she couldn't help it. So, to cover for her, Momo yelped louder. Mina felt her blood go cold as Ronin's big boots eclipsed her vision, walking straight past her. She wondered if a sneak attack could beat him, then realized quickly that was stupid. She'd seen him fight. Sneak attacks were his thing. Ronin moved to the office, his back turned to her, and Momo threw a blind stab at Ronin. Now, Momo was the smartest person in UA, so if even Mina realized they weren't going to win, Momo definitely realized. So why was she stabbing at Ronin? It was like Momo had said earlier. Stalling. Sometimes, you couldn't beat the villain. They certainly couldn't. So, Momo had to yelp. She had to draw attention to herself to cover for Mina. She had to stab at Ronin so he wouldn't turn around, and now, Mina had to get up and make Momo's actions count. So Mina got up as quietly as she could, getting stuck one more time and biting down a curse, quietly but quickly melting through it before getting up as Ronin slowly broke through Momo's defense as the sound of metal snapping as he hit a door handle so hard the metal snapped clean in half, then beating the door until its wood broken open for him. Mina had no idea what it was, though, but as she finally got up, Ronin wheeled around. For a moment, they stared at each other. She could see his eye piercing through the cracked glass, a spot of emerald green, seeming to burn through. She could see the scars left by people way better than hair, and to one side, she could see Momo leaning on the counter. Tired, blood dripping down her nose, definitely broken. Looking at her, and mouthing one word. Go. A final grimace at Ronin, then with all the training she'd done with the man himself, she bolted. A slight push off the ground, starting with a normal run, then creating acid from her feet to slide on as she bolted down the hallway, leaving her friends to die as she tried her hardest to get away. She tore through the hall, shoulder checked the door, then barreled through to keep running, only turning when she realized she almost ran straight into the next pack of villains. She couldn't go there. That was the first place Ronin would go when he was done. She could see the villains fighting, using weird guns to glue down the students and hold them in place. Maybe she could get around them. They had to fight their way through the heroes, but she didn't. She could run to the first aid station. Or, do something a little weirder. Mina glanced one last time as she slid around the building, specifically at the villains and their guns. They were shooting some kind of gun that stuck to people, like Minetta's hairballs. Iida, Aoyama, and Odro had been sent to fight the villains. Probably got beaten by Ronin, but maybe pinned down with those guns instead of knocked out. And if she could melt through Minetta's hairballs. Mina picked up the pace now, going full speed and sliding over the difficult terrain as she formed her own plan. She'd come back, rescue the guys in the building from Minetta's hairballs, and then they would steamroll Ronin together using all that advice he'd so smugly given them. Maybe she couldn't rescue civilians, and she definitely couldn't beat Ronin, but she could rescue heroes. And then, they could beat Ronin. Mina had not run away. She realized that if she could break out of her bonds, she could break everyone out. She must have then gone back and gotten up all the combat heroes he had knocked out, instead of trying to make her last stand with a bunch of rescue heroes. Giving up the immediate fight, seeing how she could affect the fight in the long term. Huh, Ronin said to himself, a little awestruck at the planning. This was definitely better than his 60%. He laxed his guard as Iida, Mina, and Bakugo all circled in from different directions to pincher him and kick his ass. He even smiled as Iida's legs let out a burst of flames. Mina shot a glob of acid around him to keep him from dodging, and the sky seemed to light up as Bakugo prepared to focus AP shot straight at him. Not bad, heroes. Bam, bang, Fs. Chapter end notes. Yo, so, the goal of this was, aside from trying to release 2 chapters in 1 month last month, to give a lot of characters small, cool moments. Tokiyami's resistance, Mineta and Kota facing down Ronin even if it backfired, Momo's sacrifice, and Mina's self-made plan to beat not just Ronin, but all the villains using their special skills. It was definitely a bit of trying to remake Kaminari's final exam. The difference, I realized, was it couldn't just boil down to a really cool fight scene, which I feels makes this moment weaker. However, I did want it to end in a fight scene, Mina specifically choosing not to fight, then coming back with aid to stand a much better chance. My goal was also rip off the Stain fight, a fight against a villain where the goal isn't to win, but to manage time, with Stain or Ronin having to worry about the heroes or Bakugo arriving and ending the fight, since Midoriya is confident either Bakugo would take out all the other villains, or stall him out and let others take out the villains, both being a fail state. I tried to also have some fun with it, specifically, using non-fighting to further the plot. There's Mina, of course, but Mineta who just flat out chickened out from the beating everyone else got, then Ronin's final fight both in choosing to try shooting into the pseudo-civilians safely, and in deciding that Mina's plan was good enough to beat him, similarly to how Ronin could have dodged Kaminari's final attack during that exam, but chose not to specifically to reward the creation of a super move. So, with all that said and done, I'd like to thank you all for your patience and for reading this. A lot of time and effort goes into these, despite my effort to write faster, but the next one shouldn't be as long. This was meant to be an extra release, so I'll try for one more this month, but I can promise how quickly it will come out. Also, I'd like to thank my editor, me. If you see any grammar problems, hit me up, but I've gotta run. Adios, amigos. Chapter 241, Finishing Loose Ends. Chapter Summary. A wrap-up for the exam, for the arc, and a chance to bring in the new arc, the Yakuza Stomping. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. There was cheering. The students cheered as the alarm blared, signaling the end of the test. Kaminari and Kirishima, having finally rescued the last 2 people, shared a lot, feeling like they were missing out on something, but in the end, they did their part. Momo and her group actually hugged, albeit they were more than a little bruised. They would be the students needing the most medical attention out of the entire test. Other students from other SH schools were excited, having passed the final big hurdle to being a hero from here. It was pretty much a straight line to heroism. And then there were 3. Tenya Iida, who didn't take part much except the final blow, smiled, taking off his helmet and adjusting his glasses as he looked over the scene before settling on one of his heroes. The students cheering, the pseudo-civilians congratulating them, and the pseudo-villains slowing down after pushing themselves so hard. It was a wonderful scene. And then there was the man. Katsuki Bakugo, who took a major part in everything except the ending. Ironically, grinned. He surveyed the scene, his work, and it was a damn fine work. The weaklings who'd risen up, the villains he'd beaten down, and the civilians he saved. This was it. This was the kind of hero he wanted to be. And, turning, there he was. Mina Ishido, who played a minor part in everything except the ending, ironically, fell to her knees from exhaustion. This was terrifying, stressful as hell, but man, did it feel good in the end. She looked around to see her friends, smiling and cheering her, the people she rescued herself, those she brought along to stall those final seconds until Bakugo could arrive, and then they didn't even need him. They beat that guy all on their own. For what it's worth, Izuku Midoriya, Ken, Ronin, or the Revenant who cared what his fucking name was, he felt like garbage. Revenant was on his back, having just been rocked by 3 heroes at once. He should have brought his equipment. This stuff was good, but his was better. Ow. He was stuck in the ground. His legs felt a little wobbly, despite his best efforts to mitigate the triple threat. At least it was no female Nomu, that was for sure. Looking around, he couldn't see much from his vantage point. Couldn't see the team he led to almost victory nor hear them cheering for their anonymous leader who nearly flipped the entire script with just a little grit, a lot of guts, and a ton of effort. He couldn't see the heroes he'd put so thoroughly on the back foot, pushing them to their limits, Momo having to take a beating to secure the win, Sato and Zero having to sprint as fast as they could to catch up and hold back the villains, and the countless others who had to face his horde, to pull out new tricks, to push their weaknesses and strengths to new heights to hold on. All Izuku could see was the 3 heroes over him, barely aware of them. Tenya Iida, the guy who he had helped fight Stain, who he'd saved from Stain. Izuku barely even remembered that. There was Katsuki Bakugo, the guy Izuku could never forget. Part of Ronin, of his definition of strength, but he was completely unaware of the reflection in their relationship. Lastly was Mina Ishido. Izuku genuinely couldn't fathom her, too used to being put against overwhelming odds to remember the fear you got the first time, or even the 100th time. Despite all Izuku didn't know, though, as he lay in the dirt too sore to stand, 3 shadows passed over him, turning to look at him, and extended an arm to help. So he rose. So they all rose. Geez Tilda, all that training, just so you could kick our butts yourself. You're a mean grandpa. Mina gave him several pats on the back after Ronin got up, creating a small cloud of dust around him. You really don't know how to hold back. Lost in one hit. You could have gone harder, Bakugo said, having moved away after helping Ronin up, dusting off his pants. I believe that was not the point of the exercise. In fact, I believe this level was exactly the expected amount. Iida went from helping Ronin up straight into hand chops with his classmate, one hand chopping and pointing at Bakugo and the other adjusting his glasses. Classmates. Man, it felt like years since Izuku had those. Underneath the mask, Izuku smiled as he stretched, feeling no need to speak. The rest had done it for him. So, he stood up shorter than most of them, trying to give them professional thanks. Mina turned his handshake into a hug, then ran off to talk to her friends. Iida bowed, then ran off to talk to his friends. Lastly, Bakugo glanced at him, at his hand, then smirked as he stepped forward and grabbed it, shaking his hand briefly. Thanks. Izuku blinked, looking up at Katsuki, hoping he'd repeat himself as they stood in the dust. When I'm a hero, Katsuki restarted. Izuku was pretty sure that's not what he was saying last time, though, because if he did this was getting off topic. When I'm a hero, you could team with me. Izuku didn't snort or chuckle, but he did smile, his grip becoming a lot stronger as he gave Katsuki's hand one final shake. No matter how this goes, no matter what anyone else thinks I always believed in you. No matter how this ends. Why so sad, old bastard? Saying I'm gonna fail. Hey, probably. The Hero Association is very stupid. They'll say you didn't save enough civilians got to see you before all his villains were deployed, not great. They'll waste your time with some extra work, then they'll let you move up. Sounds like politics and bullshit. It is. Then it must be true. Tisk. Katsuki was a little pissed off, but even the threat of getting fucked over by policies and politics couldn't keep him down as exam F called to him. What a pain in the ass. Yep. Izuku and Katsuki stared at the rest, then sighed, walking forward. But I guess that's life. For now, when I'm the #1 hero, I'm gonna cut out all this bullshit. Oh, now there's a real challenge even All Might couldn't do it. But he did cut down on ITHE change the laws, back in. The two walked off the field talking to one another, the closest they've been in a long time because of the mask between them, but perhaps more true to themselves than ever. In the end, the students who passed were displayed up on a board, all their names lined up in alphabetical order. To most surprise, Todoroki didn't make it. To almost everyone's shock, Bakugo didn't make it. To everyone except his own astoundment, though, as the students cheering died down to look at Bakugo, he didn't explode. At least, he didn't explode as badly as everyone thought he would as he stared up, taking a deep breath while running his tongue over his teeth like he was trying to find the words. Fuck. That word felt good enough. Those who failed had a minute to stew in their failure before they were told that there would be remedial classes. An opportunity to try again, to improve the issues found by the Hero Association. It was for this reason Midoriya had to wonder if he could ever have been a real hero. He stood to one side with his fellow pseudo-villains, watching the moment from afar. He was patted on the back for going above and beyond, while just 100 feet away, Bakugo was put down unable to stand in the glory he deserved, the glory students who'd done far worse than him got. Had they been so different? Revenant could not help but stare as he tried to think logically. Katsuki Bakugo had failed for a genuine reason compared to his success was unable to act outside his role. He had saved basically no one directly, and done nothing until the villains arrived. On the other hand, he himself had pushed outside his comforts and boundaries led a team, he raised morale, and in a weird way created hope for his people being a hero for the villains when all seemed lost. But what of Bakugo's success? The rest of them, the weak, they only passed because of Bakugo. The entire exam would have failed if not for Bakugo's intervention, building everyone else's success on Bakugo's shoulders after they pushed him into the mud. They had decided to fail Bakugo from before he even acted, and decided to change nothing when Bakugo changed the game. If he was in the association, would he have made an exception for Bakugo? If he was in the association, should he make exceptions? There was little doubt Bakugo failed the intended path, but... Hey, Star, come on, we're getting drinks. Another pseudo-villain put a hand on Izuku's shoulder, turning him away slightly from the students. Izuku held on for one more moment before moving on, smiling as he in turn patted the other man on the back. Well, then we can't keep the party waiting, he said as they began to walk to the exit to debrief. No use holding on to the past, right? You regret this. We nearly won. What a perfectionist. Yeah, just one big regret. One final glance at Bakugo. The piece of shit who beat him up, egotistical and violent currently staring at the screen. His expression blank, hands tense and creating small popping not satisfied, but doing his best to move on somehow. The same person who did so much wrong, but with a little time, growing into something else. But I'll get over it. Izuku turned, stopped looking back and moving on. Thankfully, after the overly complicated ending with a few more feelings than expected, wrapping up was fine. Midoriya had no idea how it went for the students probably hilariously, as Bakugo was going to be getting a whole bunch of offers from confused heroes and would be the talk of the town. On the villain side, though, it was basically a high-spirited celebration. They reviewed the footage, with Gangorka giving a small speech to them about their good work. Gangorka even looked into Midoriya a bit, offering him a job. The celebration went onto the streets, a shared meal with a lot of drinking, and all paid for by the Hero Association. Man, if Mel could have seen Midoriya refusing booze and getting poked for it, the main man would have had a good laugh. As most stayed to drink and chat, Midoriya kept it brief finishing his food, saying his thanks for the experience, then leaving. He got a lot of thanks, and even a business card from Gangorka. The irony, after what Wraith had done, was unsettling. But that was just the start of the weekend. With his HA equipment given up, Midoriya had reverted to the usual Ken equipment, meaning he was in perfect condition to go straight from the bar to calling Mao. It was a brief call confirming the side quest was done, a few details about how it went, then the offer Gangorka ended. Sure enough, that got a laugh, but that wasn't too important. So, Midoriya said as he continued down the street, finally reaching a small putt-putt building. He hung up his phone and kept walking as a large figure joined him, the pair walking together with a learned fluidity, like how they easily glanced at each other as they put away their phones to finish their conversation in person. You ready to hunt? Sheet, man, thought y'all never asked. The sunlit streets were such a different scene from the nightlife the vigilantes were used to. The life of the night, neon burning through the dark, was paradoxically dead during the day. The bright lights fell compared to the sun above, and it always messed with Midoriya's head to see it. Once they were inside, though, it'd all be the same. Probably. This is the place. The pair stood in an alley just across the way from their first target, a populated street running between them and a suspicious restaurant, or perhaps the suspicion was in his mind. This is the one on the list. I scoped it out, and I am positive there are Yakuza here. Too many people have masks. Masks. Mao hardly cared about the reason, he craved the fight, but even he questioned a justification like that. Like, fancy masks? No. Simple masks, just cover the mouth, the kind one would wear when sick. Are you sure there? Just follow me. Midoriya shook his head, then slicked back his hair before putting on his own mask, topping it off by locking the helmet. Man, gonna go beat up some sick guys, what a treat. You really know how to make a comeback, man. Midoriya sighed, giving himself one final pat down before beginning to walk out of the alley. Sure, and you really know how to waste time. Hurry up, you'll see it for yourself in just a second. It started with the restaurant, scoped out beforehand. It wasn't too populated nor in the boonies, although, at time of entry, it was very dead. A purposeful decision after how badly the last raid went. The two men headed in the front door, not hiding, fully suited, rocking the full kit, open carrying their weapons. Midoriya was just that confident. Midoriya held the door open for Mao, the big guy stepped in, and the small one not a moment later. They stood shoulder to shoulder as they entered and stared down the few people in the restaurant. The masked staff stared back for about a whole 3 seconds before the cook stepped out and threw a knife at them, smacking the main man squarely in the face before bouncing off. The duo looked at each other, Ruin chuckling and Ronin smirking as they got focused. Sick people, yeah, they're gonna need a hospital soon. The second step was to block the door. Once you had a place scoped out and confirmed, it was best to make sure no one could escape and slow down the heroes when they arrived. This was supposed to be Mao's job. He was a muscle, but if he did it, it wouldn't be supposedly his job. As the restaurant and staff revealed itself, Mao moved to meet them. Ronin had to stay back, shooting the door handle off so it couldn't be opened from the side, then throwing a table in front of it for extra reassurance. He looked over his work, nodding to himself, then turned around as someone smashed a chair over his head. Third step was to block the other doors. Tightening the net required no escape. You had to know the other exits before you even went in, or at least all the exits you could know of. After the last surprise attack, Ronin was a little more set up. He dodged the worker who'd gone for him with a crowbar, shooting the crowbar out of his hands, then charging into him for a body slam. He might have been smaller, but the bodysuit made for one hell of an equalizer. They tussled for only a moment, the department store worker clearly confused at where the crowbar had gone in his hands, hurting, unready for a sudden headbutt. With the immediate problem done and Ruin doing his job a little better than the first restaurant, drawing aggro, Ronin moved in quickly, circumventing a few civilians and slipping past them to run towards the counter. He switched from real to air bullets for safe shooting, lining it up and taking pot shots as he ran forward, then vaulted over the counter. He took a small display of candy with him, spilling onto the floor as he shoulder-checked a man to shove past him to get into the employee-only area. People were in a rush back here, grabbing tons of things. First up was the shredder they were trying to shove things into. Ronin first shot the people in the back, knocking them around like pins while he reached into his coat. He activated the jacket's inlaid quirk, air knife, to make a small knife just to cut the cable, slightly electrocuting himself like a dumbass. Something to learn for next time, just use the gun. Batting aside people, Ronin finished this step by reaching the door right as someone else did. He couldn't tell if they were civilian or punk, so he started by giving them a helping hand. They were rushing to the door, so he grabbed their head from behind and slammed it into the door, then tossed them aside to break the door handle off and drop a shelf in front of them. Now, the cage was crumpled to no real exits, and nowhere to run. The fourth step was Mao's favorite, cleaning up. Ronin and Mao pushed towards each other, wrecking shop. By the fourth building they raided, they'd started getting some unconscious cooperation, not much, but better than nothing. To avoid running into each other or getting in the other's way, the two started at opposite ends. Mao would start at the front door while Ronin pushed into the back line, then turned around, both moving towards the middle to sweep any problems up into a compact package. With alcohol and glass covering the floor, Ronin slowly walked from the bar's backside to the service side, barely batting an eye as Mao slammed 2 security guards through tables, then began breaking tables over them. His extent of helping Mao was seeing the third security guard coming in from across the room and shooting his legs out with an air bullet, stopping the attack without getting in the way of Ruin's carnage. He followed up by taking a second to actually look around the room, trying to get a read on what was happening right as a full bottle smashed into his head. The bar was in ruins, the patrons were scared or thrown aside to keep them out of the way, and the server who'd just hit him over the head to no effect was looking like she was going to piss herself as he slowly looked at her, unimpressed, then drew his pistol and shot her feet out, letting her crash in the booze and broken bottles before shooting her 3 more times in the back for attacking him. And so ineffectually, to boot. Did she miss his helmet? One last glance over the place, making sure it was thoroughly trashed. They didn't have to search the mess. The heroes and police would do that for them, investigating the scene to figure out what happened and stumbling across the crime in the space. Speaking of heroes. Freeze, oh my god. Seriously, these guys again. Ronin and Ruin stopped going through the guns they collected, glancing across the club to see the police had her van. They even recognized one of the officers. They'd seen him 3 times today so far. What were the odds? Hey, sheet, Mantilda, Ruin and Ronin shared a smile before standing up, facing down the officers, weapons partially drawn. They stared the men down, seeing not a single hero yet, smiling wider at the little in-joke, then bolted for the exit. Hey, stop them. The police were comedically ineffective at their jobs. Sure, they could take down criminals who'd already been beaten, but anyone could do that. Against anything with some life. Ruin barely ran, literally batting them out of the way. What was some more aggravated assault against officers on his rap sheet? It was already a mile long. Ronin was the much faster one, easily moving through the officers and slipping through any attempt to get him. He reached the exit first, seeing there were already officers there to try and stop him, but they didn't have much of a counter when he simply sprinted straight into one, then tossed him a sideless assault, more a football tackle, but it'd probably get on his rap sheet anyway. Out of my way. Ronin pushed through the doorway, then kicked up and off the door frame to flip over an officer, landing behind them and throwing them out of the way before Ruin crashed through the space, nearly running the officer over. As Ruin charged, Ronin grabbed the big guy's back, giving a sarcastic salute before being dragged away. Ruin's long legs and fast strides made short work of the police attempting to chase them, leaving them in the dust well before they took their usual exit out. Ruin, you ready? Should be. On your left, that wall. As the sirens started up and a police cruiser rounded the corner, Ronin drew a weapon again, Yamato. Ruin turned towards the wall Ronin pointed at, gaining momentum while Ronin lined up his shot, then quickly jumped in front of Ruin to make a single massive swing downward. A large column of smoke emerged, and Ronin barely had time to turn it into a portal before he was body checked by Ruin through the portal and through the solid wall. Ruin picked Ronin up again to keep running before Ronin got his feet under him and kept running beside Ruin, moving inside an occupied office with people actively inside it. Workers, carts, and pillars became obstacles that Ruin tried to charge through while Ronin gracefully moved around with his parkour until they ran all the way to the other side of the office, making another portal out and hitting the streets once again. As long as Ruin didn't get too hyped, it was flawless. The problem was Ruin was very excitable. As the very next portal, Ruin face planted into the wall. They didn't pause, splitting up to see each other tomorrow, even as Ronin rolled his eyes at how annoying this was to deal with. Without Ruin, though, Ronin's run through another office building went even better. He didn't bother to keep going in a straight line, now starting to move up floors. Starting on the ground, Ronin would find a fire escape plan to find the stairwells, then run at them. Yamato let him pass straight through doors, then he'd just climb the stairwell as high as he could get. His path of ascension was a little different from normal. Instead of just going up, Ronin would climb the railing, then jump to the next stairwell, grabbing it quickly before kicking off and jumping back. It was like a game of pong, with him bouncing higher and higher until he reached the top, flipping over the last railing and cutting his way onto the roof for an easy escape. By now, even if the police knew where he was, they couldn't catch him. They had to find a real entrance, then take the stairs the normal way. Wasn't like they had a chopper on standby. They had no way of catching up to him. Worse, he split their forces. With Ronin and Ruin running in different directions, the police's chances of catching them went down. They had to try, giving Ruin an easier escape, and unlike Ronin, Ruin wasn't afraid of a little roughhousing. Coming to the edge of the office, the view of the city was finally the beautiful, familiar sight of night, the sun and light sinking away, the neon beginning to buzz and street lights burn as the darkness crept up, rising like a flood. It was beautiful. Ronin planted a boot against the ledge, looking at the gap between this building and the nearest one. In the vague distance, he saw a motorcycle burn out, deliberately burning rubber before rocketing off, giving the finger to everything and everyone. A few seconds later, a much more conservative police car rode out, trying to give chase. Guess this is it for the night. For us. Ronin took this little break to check his list. He still had 5 more stops to were in a mall, so he could try to get into at least one a night. But how did he feel about attacking places that did have people? It was easier, but his goal was to break villains. Would going when no one was there but security guards be as effective? No people to beat, but I could steal as much information as I want. On the other hand, the criminals could show up and ambush me if they're fast, or worse, cover everything up after the fact. Midoriya toiled over it for a second, lining himself up with the next building, then moving away from the edge of the roof. I can't exactly turn in my findings, so no arrests, but it could be useful information for the future. This is too complicated, I'll pick somewhere else. When Ronin felt confident in his next target, he took a running start and leapt from the top of the building, pushing off the side to get maximum distance. He rose as he left the building, reaching the peak of his jump a full second later, then hanging there for a moment before he began to fall down, drawing his sword with one fluid motion. Yamato. With one large slash, Ronin was teleported further forward, latching onto the building on the opposite side with his Beowulf boots and one gauntlet. From there, it was just a quick run to the top of the building, sheathing Yamato along the way to use all 4 limbs before flipping up and making his way to his next target. 6 targets in one night, and after appearing in the Hero Association's Hero Permit exams. Not bad, even with almost no one knowing it was him in the Hero Association Hero Permit exam. With or without that though, Ronin and Ruin were becoming quite the stir in one circle. There's too much trouble. Sitting within his agency, Sir Night Eye was studying the 4th report he had only heard of the 5th so far, and the 6th was still underway as he put in some overtime to oversee what was happening. 5 raids in a single night, there's no doubt. The Yakuza hunter is once again on the Shihasekai's trail. How bothersome. Sir Night Eye set out each paper on the raids, all in a row. The Shihasekai will be more on guard than ever. Something has to change. Sir Night Eye's sidekick, Bubble Girl, stood by to help with the reports after boss put in overtime, so would she, even if she didn't always get his little eccentricities. Something's going to change. What do you have in mind? I'm not sure, but something should. Sir Night Eye adjusted his glasses. He could easily use his foresight to check, but after all might know, it was better to use it in certainty, not in questioning. Who knew what cursed fate he'd seal if he checked blindly? Better to use actual foresight than a cursed quirk. He held up his hands, one finger on each. There are 2 options. Either we move to capture these vigilantes, maintaining the original timeline, or we try to move the timeline up to capitalize on the vigilantes. Do you think it's better to catch the crooks, or move up? It could go either way without proper prompting. Sir Night Eye leaned forward, flipping through each of the paper stacks. The vigilantes are loose and they attack with civilians in the area. They don't have proper authority or training, and one of them certainly has quite the record. Furthermore, I like finishing loose ends. So they could mess up and make things worse. But have they yet? Endangering civilians, defying the law, but otherwise. This brings us to the second option. The reason Sir Night Eye opened the papers wasn't to investigate the Yakuza hunter and his partner's problems, but their findings. They've given us an in. Attacking places we didn't have probable cause to investigate. They're using us to catch the villains, with us as unwitting accomplices by following the rules. It's no genius play, but it's intelligent nonetheless. To remove them would remove a helpful piece of the bottom work of snake among the enemy. However, anyone would be more alert with a snake biting their limbs. And the other problem. The Hero Association isn't going to like pushing up the timeline, chimed in Bubble Girl. Exactly. Sir Night Eye stared at the reports, weighing up the opportunities. A top 10 hero, numerous top 100, and All Might's successor are coming in on this. With the mess that was All Might's retirement, his successor must emerge boldly, confidently, and bringing confidence. His first big reveal cannot be rushed to put fear back into villains. But, both sides also has their problems. Yakuza hunter took on multiple top 10 heroes. Yeesh, Bubble Girl flinched when she checked who was Senmaruko and Crust, some of the more formidable in the top 10. And with All Might out of the picture, are we going to try taking him on? Mirio could definitely beat them both. We can't. This was where the politics got in, annoying enough. Sir Night Eye sighed, leaning back and rubbing his face. Mirio could beat Yakuza hunter, almost certainly Ronin too, but it's too small. Lemillion's first large mission must be the Shihasekai, not vigilantes. The Hero Association was very clear. But, Bubble Girl only had to think for a second to make sure, but was fairly confident in her response. Then who on earth could actually fight them? You said there were 2 options, but it's not an option if we can't do it. He was fitting in better with his classmates, at least better than usual, getting stuck in the crowds of people lazily meandering towards their classes instead of having any drive. Took a lot of elbow work and working his elbows a lot to push, shove, and squirm his way through the sea of delinquents to his class, each motion accompanied by the kowtowing and apologizing he'd learned to do for years. He even got knocked around to beat an elbow to the shoulder, a kick to the ass. He was more confused than hurt, but in the end, all that mattered was making it to class. It was well before the bell. The teacher wasn't even there yet. Still, Midoriya's instincts told him that he better be on time, a remnant from years of being a good, well, decent student. In the class was the usual trappings: broken desks, graffiti on the back wall, and a few punks littered about the place. Was that right? He was more punk than most of them. The complications were pushed aside as someone or something near the back, a hunched figure, blocked from view by a few big coats and a bigger mess of hair. Midoriya's smile gained some heart as he walked past his desk, coming to the back everyone else avoided, standing near the desk and gently tapping it. It took a few, but slowly, the mess spread. If one looked close enough, they could see an eye open underneath the matted mess, blinking slightly, then focusing up. It widened as it took in Midoriya, crinkling at the sides as the mouth moved upwards unseen through the hair, but its effect still visible as Eiko slowly shifted up, waking up from her morning nap. Hey Eiko, he said, leaning back to give her a little space. Back to the back corner. Quote ... Midoriya. She yawned, stretching, then checked the time. Yeah, it was kind of rowdy and scary at the front by myself. Oh, class is gonna start. There were a few pops that reminded Midoriya a bit of his nightly activities, but before he could contemplate how fuck joint breaking was as a first response, the bell rang. Eiko and him both glanced up at the ceiling, called by the noise, then at each other. We'll talk more during break, Midoriya said with a shrug, maintaining his little grin. Still, it's good to see you again. Yeah, Eiko nodded, her enthusiasm building as she woke up more and more, clenching her fists in determination. And it's good to see you too, and stuff. I'm not sure you've ever noticed before, but... As the students began to trickle in, Eiko glanced around, clearly a bit nervous before grabbing Midoriya by the shoulder, pulling him in to whisper something that almost made him laugh out loud. Some of the students here, they're kinda scary. The introduction back to classes came as if he had never left. Why would it? People skip classes all the time, giving notice in advance. No, he was the weird one. And that's all the time we've got for the day, Mr. Kimmery finished, then checked the watch he didn't own, starting to head for the door. He was already reaching into his pocket for a cigarette, throwing one last glance across the class. Remember, we've got the summer school festival coming up soon. Don't make an ass of yourselves in public. He hadn't even left before the chaos started. In fact, it never really stopped. The students were talking over each other, let alone the teacher. It was the perfect time for Midoriya to make his way towards the back of the class, see Eiko, and catch up. Midoriya made his way to the back of the class, weaving around the mess of the students to see an upright, awake, and W was at a smiling Eiko. Well, what a day it was. Eiko, standing to one side of her desk, Midoriya sat up, smiling as he arrived, barely taller than her even while she was sitting. It's been too long. How's it going? Midoriya. Eiko reached up, patting him on the shoulders, the chest, the back, then giving him a quick hug. You're back. You're really back. It's been too long. A week ain't that long, Midoriya said, a little startled, then patting her back before she settled. But it seems you've had a spook, huh? Thinking our class is scary. Now what makes you think a thing like that? His tone was teasing, naturally shifting from Eiko to across the room. Two people were firing off at each other. His gaze shifted right back like a pendulum when Eiko played with her hair, dropping her voice to a low tone. Well, while you've been gone, everyone seemed to get real excited about something. She wrapped her hair around her fingers, looking around like she was sharing a secret. It's been even worse than usual. More people swing by the class, more fights, all to prepare for the summer school festival. We have those. It showed how bad a student Midoriya had become that even he hadn't been listening when Mr. Kimry mentioned it. It didn't register, like hearing that the school idol was a hippopotamus. If you were told it, you'd assume the person was joking, but no, they were serious. Wait, actually, he might have heard something about this before. Did someone mention it before he went off to UA? I guess, but it sounds super scary. Eiko shivered, Midoriya settling in to hear the story behind this. So, there'll be a whole bunch of people showing up to our school going around, walking through the classes, but they're all from different schools. Oh, right. He nodded now, vaguely remembering something about this. The plan is to stay home during the festival, right? Is it mandatory? For me, it is, Eiko muttered, shifting to kick the wall with enough force to shake it, showing the stress and fear hidden underneath. Apparently, my mom wants me to come. Says my parents, both of them are coming to see, so I gotta show up at least one day. But there's something else. Oh, Midoriya's memory was struggling. Now there was something about a big fight during the festival, right? Yeah, that's what they were trying to avoid. These kinds of things kind of blurred together. He hadn't been focused too much on a school fight in the face of his moonlighting. Yeah, they say some big gangsters are coming. And just like that, he was back. There's gonna be a big fight. They say think our school has rivals or something. Eiko's head cocked, then shook, making a mess of her hair before she leaned forward. But it's gonna be super dangerous. The school's shadow leader, the Stone Dragon, is gonna be there, and these bikers, and... What day are you coming? I dunno yet. That's fine, text me when you get the chance, Midoriya said coolly, laying out his plan in his head. I'll lock up the club room nice and tight, so no one can get in. That's what your parents want to see, right? I'll make sure it's safe, no problem. Stepping back from the desk, Midoriya threw a few mock punches as if joking around, brightening Eiko's spirits a touch. Hey Tilda, thanks, but don't throw too many hands around my dad, or he might start trying to fight you himself, Tilda. Damn right you would. With Eiko finally relaxing a bit, they shifted the talk away from the summer school festival, or as it was called by the students, the summer school fight. Once the bell rang, Midoriya said his brief goodbyes, returning to his chair to plan the upcoming events. It was over. Hunting the Yakuza was kind of his thing, but otherwise. Is this really the next big thing? It was surprising that he didn't have anything too major planned. The Yakuza leads took a lot of effort, but there were tons of them. They took so much effort because he put it in and made sure they went well. It wasn't like he was raiding any major locations, like their original drug production plan or home base. Class didn't even start with a teacher this far into the year. The teachers only showed up when they had to, marking the school more as a free turf. That went double for Midoriya, who was attending school only for the points on his record. Nothing was stopping him from wandering around, though, so. Midoriya, at least looking the part of the good student, checked over his things, then did something he hadn't done since elementary school. He glanced around and started paying attention to his classmates, listening to them. It started out with total nonsense, two groups of flashy people arguing by the door. They reminded him a bit of the 1A kid, the one who shot lasers from his stomach and was odd that he knew class 1A better than his own class. From his desk, though, he could get a bit more information. Didn't even have to stand up or wander around to learn the same broad strokes that Eiko had accidentally picked up. Ishiyama High School didn't have a summer festival, not in the sense of normal festivals. A whole bunch of schools got together to fight, and Ishiyama happened to be the school in the middle, easiest for everyone to go to, and did Ishiyama have a bit of pull. Rumor had it that Ishiyama's standing was on the upswing, apparently getting stronger as it had multiple notable forces. Its judo, kendo, photography for some reason, and some of the go-home club were on the rise. The school had a pretty simple power dynamic. First years on bottom, third years on top. Then, outside of that, there were the groups who had members from every UT clubs. At the top of that was the student council, who seemed to have been elected the same way Midoriya had been elected to be the class representative fighting. How long ago had his fight been? He wondered if anyone even remembered it, snickering to himself as he lurked around the halls. Seeing people talk so freely, Midoriya had moved from his first year class to the third year halls, lingering around and staying out of sight. Listening to kids talk about local rumors, hyping up some big fight. It was a touch excessive. But he was a kid too, right? Midoriya felt a little embarrassed, almost bumping into a senior, but disappearing just as they started to yell at him. He had better things to do than listen to someone else's prattle. It was time for lunch, and he was hungry for some relaxation with his best pal. There was more stuff to catch up on in the crafting club. A welcome surprise was finding out that the things Midoriya had done before he left for UA continued without him. He'd helped the kendo club in trade for some training, using his club to make kendo sticks or shinai for them. Turns out, they brought them back when damaged, and Eiko actually fixed a fear upping the string and leather adjusting what was left. Then, there was the more obvious the room renovations. The crafting club room no, the entire side building they were in sucked. It was old and in flagrant disrepair. The windows in the hallway were mostly broken, their lights worked only because Midoriya stole working ones from other rooms, and the tile floor in the whole building was falling to pieces, to name a few of the many, many problems. But it had kept working on. Midoriya and Eiko had asked for permission to renovate this place. Just their classroom, nothing crazy like the whole building. It was probably because of their low start that they got it through some talking with their homeroom teacher. Midoriya had tricked him into being their club advisor, as he was the only teacher Midoriya really knew. The biggest surprises were what came next, thought he had a budget. So he just hold on to the receipts and pass them on to Mr. Kimry. Eiko smiled as she concluded the little explanation, showing the supplies she'd already gotten. She hadn't bought anything yet, that was sort of Midoriya's thing. But she'd still done work. Dang, that's nice, Eiko, and you did all this. Midoriya was pleasantly surprised to hear that they had a budget, but he was more surprised to see the work that had gone on in his absence. The broken tile floor of their classroom was gone, completely torn up. Then, on top of that, she put out newspapers all around the edge of the room along the walls. The plan had been to repaint the walls first, so any paint that dripped down would be removed when they removed the tiles. Eiko had added that they could also cover the floor to keep it clean, make it easier when they got the plaster. It wasn't perfect. Midoriya had realized that if they had kept the tiles near the edges, they could catch any dripping paint or plaster, but it was probably easier for Eiko to rip up everything instead of ripping up most things. It was actual results far better than some theoretical perfect situation. And to make matters better, carrying that was a little weird, though, Eiko said as they stood around the other big thing she'd grabbed in a big fan. This wasn't the ceiling kind, but one in a large box, usually meant for industrial shops to move air around. For a tiny room with no AC in summer, though, it wasn't a fan. It was a miracle. What's it like, being a hero? Midoriya asked as he squatted in front of the fan, feeling the air run through his locks. Eiko didn't even look well, she looked a little embarrassed, but she was getting more used to the banter. Pretty windy, Tilda, I think, right? Yeah, he nodded at her joke, smiling before standing up. But it looks like the winds of change are just starting. To fix up their club, the last things to do were one final cleaning. They were well on their way to finishing their club. After the catch-up, Midoriya had finished sweeping the floor to make sure it was all clear during lunch, then started moving all his secret vigilante stuff out of the room before they even got near the cabinets. Then he just had to figure out what they'd need to finish actually fixing the place. Plaster and paint for the walls, tiles and putty for the floor, then some better working lights for the ceiling. There should be something better than the garbage Midoriya had looted from other rooms, at least. But some things take a little extra work, Midoriya explained as Eiko held their measuring tape. Midoriya held the other end, walking from her to take measurements of the room. We can't just buy tiles, we need to see how big the room is, how big the tiles are, then figure out how many tiles we'll need. We should buy a few extra, just in case. Like, making sure the puzzle pieces fit. Right. Midoriya paused, then put into his phone the next set of measurements, moving Eiko so they could finish their measurements. Then we'll try to purchase everything at once, only have one receipt to turn in. Tiles should be dirt cheap. One thing of plaster and paint should cover the room. Oh, my dad's got some paint stuff we can use. Like a rolly thing, and the weird paint tray. Eiko backed up her words with motions, bringing a smile to Midoriya's face as he watched her go, mentally comparing her to when they first met. And I learned about painting from him. We painted our fence together. It used to be black cause dad wanted to mess with the neighbors, but then the wall got mad at him. Your dad sounds like a pretty wild guy. Midoriya chuckled, finishing his note. Hadn't even thought about paint equipment like that. He'd seriously been about to buy paintbrushes, like he was making a painting. Yeah, and you don't even know the half of it. Eiko agreed, making Midoriya almost laugh out loud. She didn't notice, thankfully. But, he's fun. He seemed to really like you from the barbecue, though he kept calling you Centipeder. Is that someone famous? Pretty sure they're top 100 hero. Centipede for a head. YGHK. She shuddered, then brushed off her arms instinctively. You don't look like that at all. Anyways, we're gonna buy this stuff tomorrow, right? Yep, straight from after school. Then we can start trying to put it all together, and hopefully we'll start to see some progress by Friday. This summer feels a lot more exciting than usual, Midoriya Yates. Really heating up? Sure is. Midoriya smiled, glancing up at her as he adjusted his bag, the pair leaving the school grounds as cicadas chirped, the heated air seeming to buzz, and Eiko unaware exactly how right she was. You trying out more jokes? Why yeah, my dad said it would help me socialize, said he does it all the time with his friends, loosen up and stuff. Eiko straightened out, excited, giving one sharp nod as she moved towards the things and gently passing Midoriya his bag. They headed out together, pausing only as Midoriya locked up, walking to the gates together at least. Is it working? Do you feel looser? Eiko glanced down, then at her arms, raising them up as she looked at him and wiggled them for a moment before doing the thing he had almost forgotten all about with all his hero training and bullshit. Hey Tilda. Something about that made Midoriya smile a bit more, too happy to see someone else happy. Well, come on, Wigglesway don't got all day. Eiko smiled a bit more, glancing down at her arms and giving them one last shake before following him, asking if they could hang out more after the club stuff. Course, as long as we're not standing in the sun. Seriously, it's like it gets hotter every day. This summer feels a lot more exciting than usual, Midoriya Yates. Really heating up? Midoriya glanced over, an eyebrow raised, but he was smiling. It sure is, Ike sure is. Holy shit, Ronin shouted as he suddenly had to switch direction, performing a sudden cartwheel into a rough roll to avoid a kick that cracked the cement. Hola backquote sheet indeed, Cindy told all y'all playmates this fun. In the distance, Ruin was currently pulling himself out of a wall, actually struggling a bit as he had to work to free a limb, then began slowly prying himself out. Holy shit, no, tough shit, assholes now stay still. Her voice was rougher than Ronin remembered, probably because she was pissed. Worse, somehow, her moves had sharpened after all this time of being the joke in his mind of the top 10 heroes. She somehow got in her act together and turned it around. The streets were dim, especially after they knocked over the nearest street lamp. The buildings were desolate, especially with the damage they'd accidentally been doing to them. And to top it all off, the opponent was one person he really didn't want to fight right now. Ronin rolled to his feet, sizing up that he didn't have the time or reaction speed right now to build distance, not yet. Instead, he planted himself, firmly locking eyes with his opponent. Standing at just 5 feet 2, her demeanor had intensified. She still wore the same stupid outfit, down to those stupid white gloves, but her posture had changed a bit. She was still impatient, but she was still in control. She was angry, but this time, she was focused. She was Maruko, and as she glared down at Ronin and especially Ruin, she meant business. Chapter end notes. Yo, miss releasing it on the 28th, but I'll keep this brief. Finally back to school, and hopefully, a bit of a faster release schedule. I don't have much plans tomorrow, but I doubt I'll be doing a double Ronin release. Is what I would say, but this next chapter, the fight between Maruko and Ruin has been a chapter I've had partially made for I believe almost or over a year now, and I'm inclined to finish it. But that said, and this is this, let's not get ahead of ourselves. This chapter was as much a recap for me as it was for you. It's been a while since we were in Ishiyama, and I had to go through and make sure I wasn't missing any plot threads. Don't worry for those who remember, I didn't forget the Mr. Kimry one. With my recap done, though, comes giving us some forward momentum, finally getting Midoriya a little more involved in that school summer fight, bringing back the goal of fixing stuff and hanging out with Eiko, and a certain someone who's also making a comeback and is here to make Ronin's life very difficult. But only time will tell how that all goes. As usual, a big thanks to my editor, as well as the thing that keeps me going, DR. Pepper and y'all. People reading and responding really helps me write, as well as having the free time to write, but that's a me problem. Thanks again for stopping by. Until next time. Adios, amigos. Chapter 243, Maruko Fight. Chapter Summary. A chapter idea from October 10, 2022. Chapter Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. School could only contain Midoriya for so long, and while building work with Eiko was fun, it wasn't his real passion. No, that could only be stated by one thing: a nice long night bashing skulls with the older Voorhees Mao. It was as formulaic as ever. They met at the putt-putt place, rode out to grab their things, then rode back in to start hitting Yakuza sites. Ronin kicked a man into a door so hard the frame rattled, then stepped in harder and kicked a second time while shooting the guy to blow him all the way through. Ruin, keep your eyes and ears clear. This building is hardly stable. No sheet like it's abandoned or some sheet. Ruin laughed as he slammed a grate straight through a wall, joining Ronin in the new room. After using his Yakuza as a battering ram, he tossed the poor punk straight at someone trying to leave through a window. They collided with a heavy thud, giving Ronin enough time to run over and drag the escapee back in just to kick him to the floor and shoot him a few times. That makes 6. But where are gangs getting these numbers? Ronin's eyes narrowed beneath his mask as he inspected the scene, checking how many they'd taken down, then noticed someone moving. He sidestepped a desk being thrown at him as one of the earlier members roared to life, growing bigger and stronger as he smashed the floor in a rage just to get dropkicked squarely in the face by Mao. The numbers are thinning, but to have this many members still. Who fucking backquote cares Tilda? Ruin hopped off of the ground and walked straight over to the big guy, picking up a desk of his own along the way and bashing the Yakuza over the head so hard the desk cracked in two. He then used the halves of the desk like clubs to keep beating him down. And then the building groaned. Now, the building had been groaning since before the dynamic dipshits got in, but that was before those dipshits started punching holes in everything, not helped by the villains in LT, MNGT, also in LT, MNGT, punching holes in everything. That's why it was a little worrying when the wall began collapsing, especially Ruin managed to beat his guy through the floor. Sheet, I'm better than I thought. Ronin did a double take, needing a second glance to really affirm what he was seeing. A floor wasn't just the tile they were walking on, it was the metal support beams that held the upper frame up. And if that was breaking, should know, dumbass, the building is starting to collapse. Grab the villains, we're leaving. Fuck. Now he helped criminals bail out of the building, using Yamato to teleport everyone out as safely as he could before falling out himself. Ruin was only a moment behind having jumped down the hole to rescue the guy he shoved through the floor. Haha Tilda. Sheet, what a rush. Think it'll collapse right now. I'ma kick it a few times. I hope not, Ronin muttered, doing a head count on their guys. That was all 6 at least. At the very least, this will tie out the heroes and police longer than usual. Let's leave before. Kriya bam. The pair immediately shifted, Ruin pressing forward excitedly and Ronin moving back defensively as the building gave another large creak then let out a huge cloud of dust. but stayed standing. Yeah, fuck this shit, I'm out. Midoriya waved a hand, turning and walking back to the bike. What Tilda, come on, Dad was lame as fuck. Da building still standing back quote, man. Yeah, and I'm not gonna be around when it caves in or something. Hurry up, we've got more places to hit and people to fight. Unless you wanna keep staring at building. Sheet, man, you missing backquote out. Collapsing backquote building backquote S are cool as fuck. Mao huffed and puffed, but ultimately, he followed Midoriya along while grumbling. Man, missing backquote all the action you think these weak ass Yakuza gonna be as exciting backquote as a fucking backquote building collapsing backquote cause of us. Because of us. Midoriya shook his head, sending one final anonymous call to the police with one of the criminals' phones then tossing it at their tied up bodies. Please, well, shit, we have made buildings collapse before. Fuck it, whatever. I think this is as exciting as I want to get tonight, though. Borin backquote, laughing as they got on his bike, Mao revved the engine then peeled out of there. Come on, the night could always use a little more action. Let's see if we can make our next place full on fucking backquote cave in. There was only one place that was really at risk of collapse after that. Midoriya hadn't realized how much he hated those places he couldn't collect as much as he wanted from the site and risk being caught in a collapse. Sure, he could try teleporting out, but did he really want to risk getting caught because he couldn't draw Yamato fast enough? A pattern was emerging in the places they hit, better giving Midoriya an idea of how the Yakuza work as well. The most common spots for Yakuza seemed to be cheap spots that were easy to pick up. The total ruin part was rare, as the Yakuza seemed to buy the buildings they used so to give them some cover, they fixed them up to look more normal. I guess they're too high level to operate entirely in dumps. Low level individuals might, but as an organization. Course, that's what happens when Yashi's got levels, Mao explained as they pulled up on the next photo mall. They weren't going through the front entrance, though, no they weren't even going through the back. Mao was trying to figure out how to get his motorcycle on the roof to hide it. Each level has its own standard, its own funds, and backquote its own way of doing backquote cheat. Quote ... I don't think that ladder can hold that bike, good point taken. Don't expect too much consistency. Midoriya watched as Mao held his motorcycle in one hand to struggle even for him and tried to climb a ladder while the ladder tried desperately to stay attached to the wall. Mao glanced between the bike, the ladder, and Midoriya before stepping off the ladder with a huff. Sheet, that's why I hate dealing backquote with you smart backquote peeps. You'd prefer to drop off the ladder halfway up and smash your bike. See, Dad cheat's why I hate dealing backquote with you smart backquote peeps. Despite the complaining, moving everything around to hide their bike was easy enough. Next was to make sure they had the right building, lining up the loading bay in the back with the building inside. So, we go in, walk past everyone like we're supposed to be here, then hit the store. From there, we wreck shop, grab what we can, leave some incriminating evidence, and go straight back here with Yamato. If you get too hyped, you go for the bike, I'll go for the sewers. Midoriya held up his phone, outlining the directions on a map he had taken a picture of a week ago. You follow all that. Walk in like we owned this sheet, follow ya smart ass, and beat the fuck out of anything in our way. Then we burn out a disjoint. Iza. Mao would give him a thumbs up, the pair walking towards the wall as Midoriya drew Yamato and made them their own personal door into what was going to be Ronin's own personal hell. I checked the news while we were on the way over. Walking through the mall was easy enough with heroes everywhere in popular culture, nobody really batted a second eye at Ronin or Ruin. Ruin looked more vibrant with his mask, but to the average Joe, they had no idea who these two guys in the kind of drab costumes were. The building never ended up collapsing, but the heroes had to waste time properly evacuating the area cause you made part of the floor cave in. Only a hero or someone they had directly interacted with before would know who they really were, and even then, sometimes heroes just managed to completely miss them. After all, what was the more realistic assumption you were walking near one of the highest ranked criminals in Tokyo, or some random hero with a rank so low you had no clue who they were? Hell, they were even getting asked for autographs from people mistaking them for more popular heroes. On the backquote apart, sheet, man gotta step up my backquote game. With the veil of obscurity and a show of calm confidence, the pair walk in public just an arm's length from civilians. No one looked at the two weirdos in lame costumes, because with their confidence and standing, they seemed to fit right in. Tisk. Midoriya couldn't help snickering even as he clicked his tongue, shaking his head as they made their way to the store. Another small department store. Had to be the third one they'd run into. Was this easy for the Yakuza to set up? Likely. If the Yakuza reached out to secure large purchases from some brands they were likely to reuse them, so their multiple fronts would have similar products. With the same products to sell, it made sense to make them similar stores. That's the one. Crowds are dying out, so let's not wait around, I want to get this done before something. Excuse me, can I get an autograph? Goes wrong, Ronin sighed, his shoulders slumping. If he got asked if he was Ingenium one more time, he'd be asked twice which wasn't a lot, but pretty weird since they didn't resemble each other at all. They both just wore armor. There had to be more heroes like that. Still, he turned. Sure, who's this too? Oh no. Like, your biggest fan. The little lady in question stood behind them, her voice forced to be extra sweet while she cracked her knuckles. The name's Maruko. You need help with that, big guy. I can spell it out for you. Ruin turned a moment later, confused what was going on, while Ronin felt his shoulders slump more before he felt an explosive kick suddenly smash into him from just outside his field of view. He flew for a second, unfazed physically but taking great emotional damage as he realized what was about to happen. Not this again. Maruko bounced from one leg to the next, her eagerness clear on her face as she sized the vigilante up. She didn't bat an eye at the wall she knocked him into, barely glancing at Ronin while sizing up her real target. Yeah no, we've got to stop meeting like this. Ronin, in turn, slowly stood off the ground, backing up to make distance as he took a fighting stance of his own. Hands raised, covering his hip ribs, ready to defend against any more sudden kicks that flew his way. Honestly, I think I like this more than the alternative. What are you talking about? Maruko started, confused as she clearly never thought her banter would get anywhere, but her confusion mounted as Midoriya suddenly threw something on the ground creating a sudden flash and explosion of sound. The poor rabbit heroine's ears were pounding and the civilians nearby screamed and scattered, giving them some space to fight. Ruin. Standing was easy. She might have kicked his ribs, but Ronin was getting used to getting the shit kicked out of him. The real saving grace was a tie between Maruko's own shitty technique more pushing than hitting him and his body armor designed to take massive shocks. It wasn't time to think about that opening kick, but what would follow after? Change of plans. TCH. Annoyance evident, Ruin had been getting into a fighting position before Ronin started shouting. Fucking backquote smart peeps. Beat Maruko then escape. I can finish the job myself, but she cannot interfere. The decision seemed simple if he stepped back. Maruko was all offensive power. While Ronin could beat her, she was faster and hit way harder. That shit was tiring. Mao, though, he was all defensive power turned offensive. He was exactly the kind of opponent Maruko would self-destruct against. Besides, a top 10 hero in a mall right outside the suspected Yakuza base. Especially after all their hits and the heroes always catching up. W sheet, you're gonna make me act up Brav Tilda. It didn't matter if Mao got the intricacies. The main man's annoyance only fueled his excitement now the disappointment he thought was going to have him ramping up the rush of actually getting to fight a top 10 hero. Yeah no, go on with backquote me, lil backquote money think I'm gonna enjoy this sheet Tilda. Hey, that's my line. Maruko was oddly jumpy. She was staying in place, eyes constantly flicking between the two. It seemed the blow Midoriya had done to her ego was bigger than Ito by her reaction constantly shifting her gaze to Ruin, angling her body towards him. Ronin was mostly surprised, thought that Maruko was going to let him go. Then again, thinking back over their previous encounters, professional was not the word that came to mind. Better to take the advantage and move on than stay. As Ronin headed straight towards the shop, teleporting through their closed shutter doors to start wreaking havoc, Mao and Maruko sized each other up. You gonna chase him? Acting as the reigning champ with 5 Yakuza joints smashed today, Mao towered over Maruko. He was a little over 6 feet tall currently, with his skin purposely as pale as Midoriya's to better replicate the look of Midoriya's Yakuza hunter. He didn't bother with the freckles, but it wasn't like people had been counting all the freckles Midoriya had shown off. Other than the height, it was a whole lot of close enough is good enough. He had his upper body bandage, covering his star pattern tattoo, baggy pants, and the latest version of his jacket, a full body coat kept open with no sleeves to show off the guns. All of that was topped by his Oni mask, modified to fit his huge head. Chase him. Who gives a shit about him? In the challenger corner, Maruko was smiling but antsy. She wore her usual hero outfit still, stretching her legs to prep for a big kick. White gloves, a bodysuit with utility belt, leggings, and her shoes designed to give maximum impact in a kick. More than the outfit, Maruko wore a serious